Awesome. Rock. It's time to rock. How's it going, Alan? Good to see you, brother.
Hi, Andrew. Great to see you, man.
Fantastic. I think we were just talking a little bit off air, guys. I think the last time Alan and I and a couple of other cats were on live was not long after Eddie passing. So when was that? About 7 or 8 months ago, you jumped on for a stream, and that was really cool.
Yeah. Well, it was a crazy time right there, to lose Eddie kind of. I mean, we knew it was coming, but it's always a shock, and it was a good time for everybody to kind of get together and remind themselves of, who and what he was and what he meant to them, so it was cool jumping on and getting to say a few words, because it's very difficult for me to be able to get on, but back then I was glad to jump on and chat with you guys for a bit, and hope now we've got a little bit more time, we can kind of get more deep into the stuff that I'm really into, which is the playing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's always a pleasure. You have an open invitation to any of the shows that we do. You contribute to this to the Sunday show programs that we do as well. So that invitation's always open. We're about getting people on that contribute in the chat to talk about their stories, and that's one of the reasons why we're extra privileged to have you here, because if people don't know, Alan has been a Van Halen fan for a long time. He can tell us how long. But I discovered you through the main connection most Van Halen fans have through social media, through the Johnny Bean Show. When I discovered the Johnny Bean Show, jeepers, about 7 years ago, and just deep diving and going back, watching all his videos. And then I discovered you. And I was just amazed, because you were talking about tuning, and you were talking about this Clapton lick, and I'm going, who does this? In a great way, like I was just blown away by this in-depth research and dedication that you had and continue to have. To Van Halen and tracing and linking all those points, doing that archaeology. So tell us a little bit about that before you get into the meat of the show, if that's okay.
Sure. Well, I mean, sort of, you've kind of described some bits of what I put into what I do when I can do it. It's kind of as simple as, I do this with really any artist that I've studied, that I've ever studied. I'll be 49 in June, and I started playing when I was 8 years old. And I probably started getting extremely dedicated when I was 11. But I first heard Van Halen in 1979. When the second album came out, my uncle had had just bought the second album and had the first album as well, and he had played that one. He's one, Van Halen. A lot of people don't remember that Van Halen was not really a popular band. They had the one radio hit, which was "You Really Got Me," and most people didn't really know much about them beyond that. People weren't really familiar with Eruption. The radio stations weren't really playing Eruption per se as the intro to You Really Got Me, as classic rock radio ended up doing later on. It was just You Really Got Me, the single that people knew them by. Nobody really knew them by anything beyond that, really. And then in 79, Dance the Night Away was the first single, and that started getting some more airplay. But at the time when my uncle had bought the record, and this is in southern Louisiana where I'm from, and it was not a huge deal, but the sound was really captivating, and it was amazing. And so that, along with my uncle's large record collection, that was basically the best of all of 60s, 70s guitar music, was where I got, and this is also my father's record collection, but mostly my uncle's. My uncle was my father's younger brother, and he was living with my dad at the time in his house. And he was a guy in his early 20s, who just started college. And he had a 1968 Fender Stratocaster, a yellow one that, well, it was originally Olympic white, and it's a maple neck one. And it's a real 1968 Fender Stratocaster, maple neck, maple cap, exactly like the one that Hendrix played at Woodstock. And he had a really nice amp, a Fender Super Reverb, a 1965 Fender Super Reverb, and then a small Sears amplifier that became sort of a boutique amplifier later on, but it was just a cheap amp at that point. And my uncle had started kind of puttering around on this Strat that he paid $250 for. He bought it on time. He made payments. And at any rate, long story short, in 79, my uncle was driving his car after having had a few beers and smoked a little pot, and he went down the road. He made it about, my uncle was about as cool in his 70s as you could be. I mean, he was a handsome guy, long hair. He drove a chocolate brown 1977 Pontiac Firebird, just like in Smokey and the Bandit. It was chocolate brown with the gold Firebird on the roof, and it was a turbo. And he would take me driving in that thing, and he would floor it. And I was like, I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. I mean, I was just pinned to the back of the chair like like in a movie, like you're in a jet plane and you're just, you can't breathe, And so one night in 1979, my uncle drove that car down the road, and he was drunk and he was high, and he smashed into a brick wall, and he died at 23 years old. And that was what ended up getting me into playing music in a way, because when he died, I got his entire record collection. I got his guitar. I got his amplifiers, and that was enough to get me going. And he had a Mel Bay chord book from the 50s that he had, and he hadn't had enough time to really get into playing that much. I know that he would get the Mel Bay book, and he would do these sort of, really elementary block chord versions of popular songs. He'd written out just like the chords to say like Magic Carpet Ride or Jumpin' Jack Flash, but it wasn't anything to do with what was really being played on the records. He was just kind of taking his Mel Bay book and just learning a few chords at that point, But, he had some incredible equipment and an incredible record collection. And, like a lot of 70s popular music and 60s popular music, it was all about the electric guitar, and he had the best. He had the Layla album. He had Robin Trower, Bridge of Sighs. He had Robin Trower Live. He had the Rory Gallagher albums. The Allman Brothers were a big thing for him. He had all of the Hendrix albums. He loved Jimi Hendrix. He had Hendrix in the West. The live album was a great album that I learned a lot from. Just a ton of records. And in fact, the very last thing that he did before he went out was he was at home with my dad, and they had just put on a new record that he'd bought by Tom Petty, and it was called Damn the Torpedoes. It had just come out, and they listened to that entire album. Yeah. Then he got in the car, left, and passed away just like 10 minutes after he listened to that album for the first time. But that was the kind of taste that he had, and that was the kind of popular music that was around, because he had just bought Van Halen 2. He had just bought Tom Petty, Damn the Torpedoes. You know, he was an early adopter of Bruce Springsteen. You know, he got Bruce Springsteen's first album right when it came out, and he was only probably like 13 or something like that at the time. You know what I mean? Really, really amazing record collection and appreciation of that music that, you know, my father, you know, is a good music listener, you know, but was not musical at all. But that kind of got me going. But I didn't really get into it till I was about 11 years old. And that's when I got very serious about it. And just started applying myself to really learning how to play the songs that I heard. And I just thought it was standard operating procedure to actually learn everything note for note correctly as possible. At that time, guitar magazines had started coming out. That was, you know, we're talking about like 1983 and 1984. That was when the guitar magazines started coming out, and they had the transcriptions in there of the popular songs of the day and some classic songs. And so I started learning from some of those things, learning some things just by ear, because, you know, there's a lot of songs that they didn't transcribe. You know, you know, if I wanted to learn how to play at that time, nobody was transcribing like Bridge of Sighs or whatever. You know, you had to figure that out by yourself because nobody had transcribed it yet. You know.
Yep.
So any song that I really, really liked, I started learning how to figure out by ear. Learned how to tune to the records. And that became a thing too, because I realized it's important to be in tune with whatever it is that you're trying to figure out. So I would just tune by ear, and I tuned by ear from the time I began playing in roughly about 1979, 1980. I tuned by ear from 1980 until about 2011. When I got my first real tuner, which was the Peterson Strobo Plus HD. I'd tried other tuners, but I realized that chromatic regular tuners were not accurate at all. And I knew about, I had a really good guitar technician that's been working on my guitar since I was 14 years old. And, you know, he showed me, you know, he would show me how to use his Peterson strobe tuner, which he used on his bench, which is what every professional guitar technician uses, basically.
Yep.
But at the time, they cost about $1,000 US for many years. Yeah, they were not. They were. It was well beyond the reach of anybody other than a professional guitar technician. And so it was a big thing in around 2011 or so, when Peterson came out with their digital strobe tuners, and those things were under $100. And the top of the line one that they had, or not the top of the line, but close to the top of the line of their digital strobe tuners, was the Peterson Strobo Plus HD. And I got that one. And that was the first time you could get a real quality strobe tuner for, it was about $130. Versus almost $1,000, you know. So that gave me the access to be able to quantify what my ears were picking up from the recordings. So I would be able to tune to the recordings, and then I would be able to use the display on the strobe tuner, and it displays the pitches in cents, which is 1/100th of a semitone. So basically 50 cents is a half of a half step. So the tuner would allow me to, you know, I could tune to the recordings that I'm studying, and I can listen to the recording and tune, because I know what they're playing on each string. So I would just listen to what they're playing on that one string, whether it be an open string. I could try to find open strings where I could, or fretted notes where I can, and then tune to that. And then I take the tuner, and then I could zero in on the exact pitch using the tuner. So I could do that all the way up the, you know, for the whole, and I try various places on the neck, and, you know, and again, as long as you have a properly intonated guitar, you can transfer these tunings to any guitar, as long as your guitar is set up properly to begin with. Anybody that really wants to study a recording and tune pretty well to within to within 1/100th of a cent, you can be in tune with whatever recording you're listening to. And so I knew for a long time that, especially with Van Halen recordings, basically almost every classic rock recording was not tuned to exact A440 across all the strings, and that goes goes back to almost everybody. Probably the only other band that I studied as much or more than Van Halen would be Led Zeppelin, and I've actually probably studied and transcribed more Led Zeppelin than I have Van Halen. But that's another one where you have to, their pitches are different for different reasons. But, you know, Eddie was one that really had I discovered after finding and quantifying these tunings and recording them, that these tunings were not random, that they were things that he used over and over. So I would find a tuning on one song, and then I would think, okay, well, that's that song, and I'd move on to the next song on the album, and then I would see, oh, that's a different tuning, and then I would see another tuning repeat. So when the tuning it's not a random tuning on every single song, the tuning would repeat. Say there'd be a tuning that's on the first album that would then repeat on the second album. There'd be a tuning from the first album that he used on 1984. You know, there were just certain tunings that he would go back to. I don't know why. I don't know if he was able to even quantify these things. I suspect not. I think Eddie might have been. I know he was tuning using a Peterson strobe tuner, because we see him. There's dozens of pictures of him with a Peterson strobe tuner backstage forever. I mean, going back to the first tour, as soon as he had enough money to buy a good strobe tuner, he had one. And that would be starting in at least 1977, 78, right after the band got signed, and maybe had a little bit of money that they could use on equipment. And so that, you know, it made me, I kind of could put two and two together. I could realize, hey, I'm seeing him with this strobe tuner. My theory is that Eddie used his ears and the Peterson strobe tuner and arrived at what he wanted for whatever song, whatever application he wanted to use. So that was kind of a bit of what led me into his tunings, because his tunings are so unique and so kind of complicated and so misunderstood that I wanted to record them. And so I've made it sort of part of my study is to find, quantify, and record and ultimately share the tunings from the Van Halen records. And that's really, again, it's super helpful to be in tune with the recording that you're learning from. It's kind of job one. You know, it tremendously helps when you're transcribing. It helps when you're playing and learning. And, you know, it's a lot more fun to play along with a record when you're exactly or close to exactly in tune with it. You know, it's a frustration. When you really sit down and start playing along with Van Halen music, it's kind of frustrating for many reasons, because it's hard to figure it out, a lot of it. But it's unpleasant when you cannot get in tune with it, when you can't figure out how to get in tune with it. And it's not just a question of, oh, I'm going to tune down a half step, because Eddie just very rarely, he did tune just a straight 1/2 step down tuning occasionally. But I mean, I've only counted maybe 3 or 4 instances on all the albums where he actually did that. He usually had some kind of variation, some sort of tuning offset that was just different, you know? So if all that makes any sense, it's kind of a lot of information, but that's kind of a starting point. And then, you know, I just go back to learning the licks, and I learn the licks from any transcriptions I can get my hands on. I study that. I find out what's right, what's wrong about it. With the advent of the internet, I've gone on some forums, met a lot of really smart people who study just as much or more as I do. And, you know, I kind of go back and forth with them, and we debate things, and we get sort of like an evidentiary consensus about certain things. And with the internet, we've also got the ability to see video clips, and we've got audio clips. You know, we've got live shows, we've got bootleg live shows. We've got some things that, and of course with the reunion tour, we've got some high quality footage where we can see these rarely played songs that they only played on that last round of reunion tours. And we can see, oh, his hand is down here. It's not up here. It's down here to play that, you know? So that kind of gives you a clue, and you can kind of get a picture of the pick attack and which direction the pick is going when he's playing certain licks. And of course, you can slow down the video and audio, which it was pretty much impossible to do that back in the day when I started doing this. You'd have to you could slow things down, but then it would make the pitch go completely down an octave, and it was very difficult to hear what was going on. And now even with your YouTube, you can slow down the playback speed, and the pitch remains the same, but the speed goes slower, so you can really have a chance to get into it note for note. And I use those tools, and again and along with the help of many fine people who I've learned from, and continue to learn from, and that kind of helped me get into transcribing. And what I was going to come on and talk about was the Eruption transcription that I did, which appeared in the February issue of Guitar World. And so that kind of came about sort of semi-accidentally. I basically did the transcription, with the help of my friends. And I didn't really, I didn't have a kind of a master plan, other than I would have liked to try to get it out to as many people that may want to see it. I worked on it it took me about 7 years off and on, working with my friends and refining it and learning more and more and editing it and correcting it, going back, getting it to a good friend of mine who did the actual musical transcription. They took my gibberish, because I don't read or write music. I just wrote out tab, basically, with all kinds of notations. And then I would send it to my friend who is a genius, who went to music school and does professional transcribing, Matt Sharfglass. He's a former editor at Guitar World. Wow. And he did the kind of the translating of what I wrote out into a full, beautiful musical score with all of my notes intact and all of my fingerings that Again, there's a place for everything in my transcriptions, and there's an evidence-based reasoning behind the fingerings and the picking directions. And that's a thing that's often lacking whenever you get a transcription. They're not necessarily going to tell you, okay, use this finger for this note on the left hand, use this downstroke or an upstroke for this note on the right hand. Most transcriptions just don't do that. They almost never do that. And that's really critical to understanding how to play the stuff. Even if you have an accurate transcription, you don't know which fingers to use, and you don't know which picking direction to use. And I'm putting stuff down that's really not. It's important to understand that when I'm writing stuff that's in a transcription, I try to leave myself out of it. And I'm trying to use evidence to show that this is how Eddie played this lick. It's not my opinion of how Eddie played this lick. It's that I have evidence to show that this is indeed almost totally the likelihood how Eddie played a certain thing, and that is something that's probably different in my transcriptions than just about anybody else. And again, I have a lot of friends that are equally as crazy as me or more crazy, that really understand the stuff and have the people that I've learned so much from, they look at it the same way. It's not enough to just say, like for instance, the Ice Cream Man lick, that lick was transcribed in a Guitar for the Practicing Musician issue in 1986, I believe. And it was Andy Aladort, who's the kind of a senior longtime transcription editor at many guitar magazines, great guitar player, and a guy that I've become friendly with and I've met and hung out with a few times. But, he wasn't a super Van Halen fan. So, he and those people were on a deadline when they did those transcriptions. They might be given like 2 weeks to work on something at most. They're told the thing that they've got to figure out and transcribe and get written down and get sent off to a printer. And they don't have the luxury of what I've had, which is I've had 40 odd years to study one lick. I can go back over years and go back and study one lick and try to get it right. You know, so actually Andy had transcribed the Ice Cream Man lick as a tapping lick. And it was not tapping, it was, you know, it was a pattern, but it was picked, you know, and it, so that one kind of thing, you know, is like, I'm not holding anything against the guys that did the transcriptions in the past necessarily, but the fact is that they were so incorrect that it was very frustrating for me as a kid trying to learn from these things that were hopelessly wrong. And I'm trying to kind of weed out that stuff and take advantage of all the friendships I've developed over on the internet over the years and the technology that's out now to try to zero in on how to play things. And with Eddie, it's a great opportunity to sort of, demystify him, take him down off the pedestal that people put him on, because after all, to me, I don't look at him the way a lot of people look at him. A lot of people just look at him like he's an alien, like a genius that was just put on this earth to do this one thing, magical thing that nobody else can do. And, I look at him and some of the best players, like, it's just the fact is that they put in more work than anybody else. They lived it 24/7. They were good, not by accident. They were good because they did the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. Those guys worked harder than the average person. And that's why they were so good. And that's why there's so much depth and nuance to what it is that they did. And it comes out sounding like magic, but it's hard work. It's luck on their part. And, it's a great opportunity for me now to kind of show how, I guess with my transcriptions, if you look at it in the detail and the work that I put into it, it's just a reflection of how much nuance and study and depth and just hard work that Eddie put into his playing. It's not accidental. It's not random. He's playing things that he repeats in the same way over and over again over decades, and it's kind of a fun. I think it's really, really fun. Some people think it's crazy that they can't understand that I even would get joy out of doing this, but I do. It's a lot of fun. I love learning something it's just the more time I spend working on it and learning it, the more rewarding it is, because it's even on a recording that you're ultimately so familiar with. But when you learn it on a note for note level, you have so much more appreciation for what was really going on in it and how, like where it came from. And you even mentioned like the Eric Clapton lick. Friend of mine and we figured out that there was a great Clapton lick that was present in just about every great solo that Eddie ever played. And I've done a video on my channel about it. And it's a lick that's played during the guitar solo at the end of Sitting on Top of the World, the live version of Sitting on Top of the World from Cream's Goodbye album. And my good friend Bill, who's taught me so much about Van Halen, more than anybody else I've ever known, Bill had transcribed that, and he figured out how that lick fit into a bunch of other solos. And though I kind of knew intuitively that he was right, I didn't know specifically how it fit in. Bill was the one that taught me how that lick fit into all these other solos. And when he did that, it was like a light bulb moment. And then I was able to kind of further refine what he taught me and really delve deep into how it's reflected in so many great solos. So yeah, that and then that solo, I can play a little bit of that lick from the Goodbye album, and it's let me see what key is that in. Yeah, it's in F sharp. That lick right there is just something that, just bits of it. And sometimes the whole lick is just pops up in Eddie's solos all over the place. It pops up in Out of Love Again, Hot for Teacher, You Really Got Me. It's in Eruption. It's just in almost everything that you can think of from Eddie, it pops up in there. So little discoveries like that happen over many, many years. And why would that happen? Well, Eddie Van Halen said that the only guitar lesson he ever had was from learning Eric Clapton's live Cream playing. he wasn't lying. I mean, he learned a lot of other note for note stuff from other artists, you know, like The Who. He learned all of the Live at Leeds album note for note, and so did Alex. He learned I'm Going Home by 10 Years After from the Woodstock Live album note for note. You can hear a lot of those licks in Eddie's playing too. He did learn, he liked Deep Purple a lot, you know, but it was Clapton that it was number one and an abiding influence. And that's the one player where his licks just come up all the time. There's just no getting around it. And then when I started transcribing more, I would see it pop up even more. And it, you know, it's even in Eruption or slight variations of it. Like even in the first opening lick of Eruption, which begins with a slide. It's a double stop slide from the 7th fret at the 5th and 4th strings up to the 13th fret of those same strings. It starts out, and then it's a long slide down from the 15th fret on the low E to the 3rd fret, and then to the open A power chord. But it's very fast, and it just goes like this. And that's before the rest of the solo begins proper. And it just starts off with a little slide from the 4th fret up to the 7th fret, and then a bend. It's actually a series of wide bends that's almost like a wide vibrato. So the first bend is a whole step, and then the rest of the wide bends are actually almost like 1 1/4, 1.5 step. He's kind of over bending, exaggerating the vibrato. And then the little climb up the blues box. And he does a little artificial harmonic on the 7th fret of the G string. So this first lick is kind of a complicated lick that took me many years, and I still didn't get it right until another friend of mine, Troy Grady, had figured out how to properly play this lick, and he gave me some video demonstrations of how I'd been playing it wrong. But the lick is basically the first repeating lick in the song is it's the open E string played with an upstroke, and then a silent hammer on. A silent hammer on is just you're taking the left hand and it's not coming from a preceding note. You're just hammering onto the string without picking it, just a hammer on by itself, and then you're going into a pull off to the 5th. So the first thing is the open E string, then a silent hammer on to the 8th fret of the B string, and a pull off to the 5th fret of the B string, and then a pull off to the open B. And then you do another silent hammer on to the 8th fret of the G string. And then you complete that's a 5-note piece, and you just kind of link that whole thing. So it's so in other words, you're only picking one note. You're only picking first the open E string. So that whole sequence, which is very fast and it's almost inhumanly fast. But the reason is that Eddie he's not Yngwie Malmsteen. He's not picking every single note. Uh-huh. He's picking one note, and his left hand is doing all the other work, and it gets an unusual sound. And that lick was being played wrong by every player. I've looked at everyone I could find on YouTube. There's probably hundreds of people that I'd seen on YouTube attempting to play Eruption. Yeah. You know, they're everywhere. Yeah. Every one of them got it wrong. And that goes for every professional big shot player that attempted to do it that you can think of. They were just wrong. And it was Troy Grady that caught it. And I was playing it wrong for years. I'd refined it, gotten it close, but I never got it right until Troy Grady showed that to me. So his help with that lick was critical. So that same lick process appears in other songs, and Troy had shown it to me. Eddie plays that same lick in the B position in the second solo of I'm the One, and he also plays it in B during Somebody Get Me a Doctor. And that lick, it's the same thing. You just move it up to the B position. You're playing the open E, then you do a silent hammer on to the 10th fret of the B string, a pull off to the 7th fret of the B string, a pull off to the open B, and a silent hammer on to the 10th fret of the G string. And then you complete that whole cycle again. So it's So that's the beginning of the
Wow.
second solo of I'm the One. But that's the same thing as what's going on in Eruption. So this is in B and I'm the One. And again, I'm only picking one note.
Wow.
So that Eruption lick is in the 5th position. So that, it's just a little example of something that, I was playing that lick wrong for like over 40 years because I'd started working on Eruption in 1986. And I didn't get that lick right until Troy showed it to me and proved it to me with video evidence. I got that right about a year ago.
Far out. Far out.
Yeah, that
Far
one lick.
Out.
Yeah, that's a lot. But again, I don't fault Andy Aladort or any of the other people that were transcribing before. Like Steve Vai was the first person that tried to transcribe it. He was transcribing Eruption without an instrument. He did it with no guitar in front of him. He did it like backstage at Frank Zappa shows when he was playing with Frank Zappa. Whenever he had time, like on the tour bus, he would listen to it on the cassette. He'd write it down in notation. But he had no idea really because he wasn't sitting there with a guitar. And the guy didn't have over 40 years to figure out one lick. He was given the assignment by the magazine and said, here, get this to us in 2 weeks if you can. And he's just trying to fit it in to his life as a real musician playing original music and touring. So they just didn't have the luxury or the technology of what we have. The library of the live shows, the slowing down, all that stuff that I mentioned. So, and then they didn't have the ability to bounce things off of really smart people all over the world on the internet, which of course didn't exist back then. And I didn't even get really on the internet until about 2008. I didn't get my own computer until 2008. I didn't have a cell phone until 2006. So, I was like everybody else. I was just learning with a cassette. Really, I was recording things onto cassettes and just rewinding and but now that we've got the technology, and again, I can use the Peterson's tuner to zero in on the exact tuning. I've got all these advantages that these other transcribers just didn't have, and the ultimate luxury, which is time. These decades to just keep working at it, and again, and having the sounding board of other really smart people who bring all the evidence. They have the mountain of evidence to prove how this is. In fact, the evidence that Troy showed for how that lick was done was, there's really some ultra clear video of the US Festival that Troy showed me of him doing the lick on Somebody Get Me a Doctor in the B position. Then I also saw some kind of bootleg film of Eddie playing that lick in I'm the One, I believe, inside the 5150 studio during the rehearsals for the 2008 reunion with Roth. Wow. And so there's a lot of just anytime he did that lick, he did the same thing. He picked just the one note, and everything else was just hammer-ons and pull-offs with the left hand. That's exciting.
So folks, you've heard it. You've heard it here, and Allen's always going to give this information to anybody who invites him to give it. But we're humbled to have you on our show, Allen, to explain that process, because as a Van Halen fan, I'm fascinated. I've just been fascinated and captivated by everything that you've said. It's remarkable. And we have to give credit where credit is due and acknowledge you for that hard work that you've given, because it's a legacy that we're following, and it's a legacy in a way too, Allen, that you're giving as a Van Halen fan, as a musician, as a guitar player, for other people to pick up on. And the humbleness that you've displayed just in your presentation by linking it back to Andy and Steve Vai, but also the network of friends that you've developed through social media and through the other Van Halen fans out there, is remarkable. And it's a credit to you as a man and as a musician be humble and to link that, because it's fascinating. You know, I'm on the other side of the world and I'm sitting here and I'm just being blown away by it. And I just don't know what to say other than thank you. And you know, thank you to the hard work and the dedication, and you know, that's awe-inspiring. And you've heard it, guys. You know, you can go and play something that you've been playing for a long time your way, and if you want, Allen has given you, he said clearly, the key. I'm not giving you my interpretation or my opinion, which is fine. I'm giving you, and it's up another level, I'm giving you how Eddie's playing it through the mind of Eddie. So that's remarkable, and top marks, and congratulations, Allen. And before I get you to talk a little bit more, I just want to do a quick shout out, because we've got some people here. We've got Fruitcake Tony. We've got Teresa from Brazil saying hello. We've got Warren from Australia. G'day, brother. How are you? Get well. We've got Nelson, another good friend of the show, jumping on. So, and Johnny Heartbreaker. Thank you guys for being live and hearing how Allen has progressed and taken this transcript of a guitar piece that we've heard so many times, that's had such a huge impact on us as music fans and guitar players. Because I say that, Allen, because there is a difference between music fans and guitar players. You know, there's a lot of people that I've met over the years who just get blown away by Van Halen and that guitar piece, and you know, appreciate it for what it is as music. And then you've got another category of guitar players out here trying to play it, and you know, doing their versions of it. But finally, after 40 years, we have pretty close to the way that Eddie played it, which is remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for all that, first off, and you know, that's the thing. It's there's a whole other great thing about not learning how Eddie did it. There's a great thing about, you learn a lot in the process of getting it wrong. You might have stumbled on another lick because you got that wrong. I mean, there's a history of people doing that. You know, there's value in not getting it note for note right. Like I don't have any hatred for anybody that doesn't care to get it note for note right, or just gets to a certain point. Everybody has their own sort of breaking point when it comes to learning something. I've never reached that breaking point, though. There's never going to be a point where I'm going to say, no, I don't want to learn it anymore. If there's a piece of knowledge that comes along that gets it closer to what the artist actually played, then I want to know what it is. It's, for me, that's just me. I want to learn exactly how it was done. The phrase that comes across that people often say about Eddie and about a lot of other players is that it's not about the equipment, it's not about the amplifiers or the guitars, it's about the fingers, it's about the hands. And Eddie himself would say that and he always gave that example about how Ted Nugent plugged into his effects, and Ted Nugent sounded like Ted Nugent and he didn't sound like Eddie. And Eddie said that's because every guitar player it's all about their fingers. It's all in their fingers. It's all in their hands. And what I think I've done is that I've only agreed with Eddie about that, but I've tried to go the next step, which is to specify how it's in the hands, how it's in the fingers. And what that means is, which finger did you use to play that lick? Which picking direction did you use to play that lick? Whether you used a hammer-on or a pull-off, or whether because you can play, say that one lick that still is even blowing my mind to this day, that Troy Grady got me going. You could play it or come close to playing it by doing other things, by picking more notes. Like I think I can't even play it the wrong way anymore, because I've been playing it the right way for the last year, so I can't even remember how I used to play it. But you can play it. Let's see. I mean, there's a difference between that that's a big thing right there. I mean, the only other person that the one person that I saw come close to getting it right was Alex Skolnick, and I listened to his. He did a relatively recent podcast about Eddie shortly after he died, and Alex was playing it almost right, where he did the silent hammer-on. He played the open string. He did the silent hammer-on at the 8th fret, the pull-off to the 5th fret, the pull-off to the open B. But then he would pick the 8th fret of the G string. So he got it all right except for one note. So Alex Skolnick got very, very close. He got closer than I did, but it was Troy Grady and the video of Eddie doing it that way in umpteen different examples that got me to realize, oh, okay, well, that's really how it was done, you know. But, you know, props to Alex Skolnick because he got pretty close, but not exactly right, you know. And then as far as the Eruption piece too, I was also inspired by Pete Thorne's attempt, you know, because Pete was the first guy on the internet to really do a note for note breakdown of the whole piece in a long form type thing many, many years ago. And, you know, he would be the first to tell you that, you know, it's always a learning process with him. And Pete studies Eddie like, you know, just as a fan, as for fun. You know, he's got his own musical life and everything. But, you know, he likes to study as much as he can. But, you know, even when I saw that, I was like, whoa, that's really good. But, you know, we're still off on a lot of the parts, you know. So I would use all the resources that I could, you know, if there was somebody that got something right, if there was a transcription that was more right than wrong. I studied all the previously available official transcriptions that were done by Wolf Marshall and Steve Vai were the main ones. And then Jimmy Brown from Guitar World, who is the current Guitar World editor, the current Guitar World transcription editor. He did the last major attempt of it, which was, I think, in 2004. And Jimmy, Jimmy is the guy that ended up putting my transcription in the magazine. The way that my transcription ended up getting into the magazine, and I call it my transcription, but I try to give caveat. It's me. It's my friends. It's me, my friend Bill. It's Troy Grady. It's my other friend Mark Bonta, who helped me work on the Univox EC80 echo dive at the end of the song. He and I went back and forth on components, figuring out how Eddie did the octave dive at the end of the piece using the Univox EC80A unit, the vintage unit. But I mean, I say it's my transcription, and I kind of do that for shorthand because I really don't mean it's mine. It's really the result of the collaboration of the people that taught me an infinite amount about how to play this piece. But anyway, I digress. I ended up through a friend of mine an acquaintance that I made, and I'm glad to say he's a friend, Allen Paul, who's Andy Aladort's co-author of the Stevie Ray Vaughan biography called Texas Flood, and Allen Paul is also the author of One Way Out, which is sort of the definitive work on the Allman Brothers. He's just a great journalist who's published in every major newspaper and magazine you can think of, and he'd been working with Guitar World on and off for quite a while. He only knew one guy that was still active that he was in touch with, and it turned out that his friend Jimmy Brown. I had shown the transcription to Allen Paul, and Allen said, "You know what? This is nuts. I know a guy who will appreciate how crazy this detail is." And he just fired it off in an email to Jimmy Brown, and within a day, Jimmy had responded right back to him and said, "You know, this is the most detailed thing we've ever seen." And you know, I had sent it off in the hopes that they might have used the transcription as maybe a springboard to maybe, you know, just something that they could pull from to maybe learn a couple of things. I wasn't expecting that they were going to publish the transcription in the magazine as it was, but as it turns out, Jimmy just came right back and said, "No. We're going to publish this transcription. We're going to credit you as the transcriber, and we're going to put all your friends. We're going to give them acknowledgments for what they did in the transcription." And true to his word, they did end up doing it. It took a little while to get it published. The January issue was to be, and ultimately was the official Eddie Van Halen tribute issue that of Guitar World. That issue is the one where they show the picture of Eddie sitting on the beach in Malibu. I'm sure you have a copy of it right there. That magazine was originally supposed to contain my transcription, quote unquote, my transcription in that piece, and several other Van Halen transcriptions were supposed to appear in that magazine. There was apparently what Jimmy had explained to me was that there was such a flood of requests for licensing and publishing rights and clearances for the band's lawyers that basically the lawyers were kind of overwhelmed and didn't have time to respond to those requests in time for the publication deadline of that original memorial issue. So all of those Van Halen transcriptions came out in the issue that follows that one that you have right there, which was the February issue. And so this is the February issue right here, which contains the Eruption transcription, and it's also got transcriptions to Mean Street and I'm the One in there. They basically republished Andy Aladore's transcription of Mean Street, and I'm the One is also more or less a republication. Although they did use some of my corrections. I gave them some corrections for some of the different licks in I'm the One. So I'm the One is not 100% accurate in there, but there are some things that I did fix in that one. So, you know, it's really a good place to start. I like to say that, you know, Eruption is it's a great piece. It's a famous piece. It's the one piece that everybody always referred to when they talk about Eddie. But for me, I'm the One is sort of, and I call it the Rosetta Stone of Eddie's playing, because, you know, so many licks that Eddie relied on his entire career are just kind of mashed into that one song. And a lot of players, you know, have said this, you know, that no matter what you say, I'm the One just has the kitchen sink. It's got all kinds of licks in there. And again, even I'm the One has that same lick, you know, except it's in B, you know. Even that lick begins with an Eric Clapton lick, which is, that's the beginning of that same Eric Clapton lick. So Clapton would have been like, that would be an Eric Clapton lick. So there's an Eric Clapton lick, but Eddie goes,
wow.
But he starts it off with an Eric Clapton lick, which is, that's the beginning of this. It's in there. It's always in there. You know, Eddie, he never lied about where he got this stuff from, who his number one influence was, who he was trying to copy. He tried to copy Eric Clapton's tones, specifically the live Cream tones. You know, he liked a lot of other guitar players, but Clapton was his number one guy. And so in the interviews, over and over again, it's always back to Clapton. It's always back to Clapton specifically for playing, for vibrato, for feel, for soul. But it's also about specific licks, and it's about specific tone chase. People are always chasing Eddie's tone specifically. A lot of times, mostly it's from the first album. But Eddie got to that place because he was chasing Eric Clapton's tones. That's where it started for him. And, cool thing about music is that if you really want to understand the guy that you're listening to, you go on that journey backwards and you go where that guy got his inspiration from. And then you can leapfrog back all the way back. You know, you can go back to Charlie Patton, you go back to those really very, very early recordings. Eddie didn't really do that. Eddie just went to Eric Clapton. One of my favorite interviews with Eddie, was, who's your favorite guitar player? And he answered Clapton to the bone.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting you should say that, because even up until recently with that Smithsonian Institute interview and the woman interviewers trying to make a reference to Hendrix, and look, we love Hendrix, guys, we love Hendrix, but he's adamant. He a couple of times he corrects her. No, it's Clapton. It was, so he's again. So we would just have to echo, guys, everything that Allen has just said. He's quite adamant, isn't he, on that 100%. Interview?
Oh yes, and in every interview, And Eddie would even say himself, he would say, I know people don't hear it. And sometimes Eddie would say, I know I don't sound like Clapton, but if you really study, he does.
Wow.
He's playing specific Clapton licks note for note within his solos. So, if Eddie were to say to me, I know I don't sound like Clapton, and if he were sitting here in front of me right now, I'd go, oh, no, you do. And here's what you did.
Wow.
That's, he expanded on it, but those specific licks stayed within his actual solos all over the place. I mean, Eddie was to the point, and not many people know this story, but he and Alex saw Derek and the Dominoes at, I believe it was the Santa Monica Civic Center. Alex was a little bit older. Eddie was the younger, but they were able to get tickets. They got very good tickets. And again, this was not a huge venue. Clapton and the Dominoes were sort of unknown. The Layla album wasn't a hit. Nobody knew who these guys were playing behind Eric Clapton at the time. Yep. But they got good seats. I believe my recollection of it is that they had like third row seats. They probably fought their way to get even closer, but they were directly in front of Clapton, and they had such good seats. But Eddie brought binoculars. He was in the third row. He was probably no more than like 15 feet away from Eric, but Eddie got binoculars so that he could get up close on Eric's fingers, on his hands, so that he could see which picking directions he was using for which licks and how he was playing. And that's a real thing. Eddie really studied Eric Clapton. A lot of people will fight me about originality and just get into these long arguments with me about how it's terrible for originality to study things note for note, and you'll never be an original player, but Eddie is the trump card that defeats all that, because Eddie could care less about being original. He just wanted to play with soul, and he wanted to sound like Eric Clapton, and Eric Clapton was the guitar player that he felt was the most soulful player that spoke to him. And he made it his business to figure out how Clapton played. How did Clapton get that sound? How did he play? And that was a stunning thing when I heard that story. It was just like, whoa, not only do I see it in his playing, but that story tells you. And when you go back to how old Eddie was at the time of that concert, because this was like, I think it was 71, I want to say, 1971 at the Santa Monica Civic. Derek and the Dominoes played there. I believe there's even a bootleg of it on YouTube, and you can hear the show where Eddie is there. And if you can imagine, Eddie was probably, I'm going to say he was probably like maybe 11 years old, and Alex was probably like 14, something like that. Wow. And he's sitting there with binoculars studying studying Clapton's hands, So studying things exactly note for note worked pretty darn good for Eddie Van Halen, and like I said, he did that with all of the Cream live stuff. He said it in every interview you can name. He named off the specific songs, live versions of Politician, live versions of I'm So Glad, live versions of Sitting on Top of the World, from Goodbye. And then of course, Crossroads from Wheels of Fire. And I believe Eddie also got Live Cream volumes 1 and 2 and studied those. And he liked other players. He liked Jeff Beck, but Eddie Van Halen's favorite Jeff Beck album was Blow by Blow. And Eddie specifically said he didn't like any of the albums that Jeff did with Rod Stewart. Where most people are like, well, the only Jeff Beck albums I can stand are the ones with Rod Stewart. It's like everybody just wants truth and maybe Beckola, maybe.
Yeah.
But Eddie's like he loved the jazz fusion thing. He loved, and probably Alex too. I mean, Alex is along for the whole Eddie ride. Alex and Eddie are one person, musically. Eddie doesn't exist without Alex, and Alex as a musician doesn't exist without Eddie. Eddie could never successfully play with other musicians most of the time when Eddie, if you see Eddie sitting in with somebody, he's pretty well lost. And a lot of times he gets completely lost. You know, he's just out of his element. He really doesn't know what to do. But when he and Alex are together, they're making their music as only they can make it, their own unique sense of time. It's those two guys, but they're both of their musical tastes, they kind of meld, because these were kids that were learning these things together. They were learning the Black Sabbath, they were learning the Who, they were learning, they were learning the Cream together, and some Hendrix. They learned the simple things. They learned like Foxy Lady and Purple Haze, their own sort of versions of them. But they studied the stuff note for note. They really knew how to play that stuff, and they expanded on it. They took it to another level for sure, and did their own original music, which is stunningly original, but has a deep root and basis in note for note study of these artists that they really loved. They didn't just wash their hands and go, oh, I'll never be able to play as good as Eric Clapton, so why bother studying from him? What can I learn from him? He's an alien, but Eddie didn't do that. Eddie was like, no, that guy really gets to my heart. I want to learn what he's doing. How does he do that? How is he making such a connection to me? I want to learn how he's doing that. And he did it, and there's so many examples of him doing that. You can obviously go to that famous interview with Lisa Robinson where he plays Crossroads note for note, and he pretty well nails it pretty much note for note. Anytime he would jam, he was always wanting to jam with people on Cream songs. If he got together with Steve Lukather or Steve Stevens or whoever he's jamming with, he's always playing a Cream song. It's going to be Sunshine of Your Love. It's going to be Politician. When he's on Letterman, he plays Sunshine of Your Love and Crossroads. I mean, he was in love with the live Cream, and I'm sure he started studying the recorded versions too, but not to the degree that he did the live stuff. It was the live stuff that he really loved, and that's the stuff that comes out, in there. So,
as a Clapton nut, I'm fascinated, and your elaboration of the relationship between Eddie Van Halen and Eric Clapton, it's inspiring, Alan. Thank you. It's remarkable that the connection that you've made to these great songs, and I'm going to echo what you've said. As a Clapton fan and a Van Halen fan, yes, of course, he's made these connections for a long time, his relationship and his admiration of Eric Clapton. And I'm going to say, look, go back. I'm going to say, go back and listen to that stuff, and then go and listen to Van Halen and just try and make those connections yourself. There's a couple of questions I want to ask you that's been burning in the back of my mind. And I'm intrigued to know a little bit more about this tuning, the tunings that you've elaborated for us earlier at the top of the show. Was this something that Eddie did? You've made the connection and said that these weren't random occurrences. That they were certainly determined and applied by Eddie. So was this something that Eddie did in relationship to the scales and to the notes that the songs or the tunes were played in? For example, let me try and explain it. It's important. Bear with me. So we know the key that a song's been played in B, for example, and we know the scale that we might play, or the scales that we're going to play the song in. But Eddie is saying to himself or to Alex, well, I'm going to fiddle with the tunings just to give it a different kind of vibe. Is that what Eddie's doing, Alan? Do you think is it that simple, or?
Well, I can't 100% speak to I can give you an educated guess as to why Eddie did these tunings.
Please do.
The main thing is that the majority of what Eddie's doing are tuning offsets.
Okay.
Tuning offsets are made to make the guitar more in tune with itself. Because even Eddie's given many interviews, and a lot of people know this, that a guitar is physics basically make the guitar to where notes will not be in tune with each other all over the fretboard and with the open strings. So if you were to tune the 6th, 5th, 4th, if you tuned all the strings, just the open strings, straight to their exact chromatic pitch, you're going to guarantee that the rest of the guitar and the rest of the positions on the neck will not really be in tune. Okay. So a tuning offset is sort of a compromise tuning. It's tuning each individual strings out of chromatic tuning with each other to a certain degree, so that you have a compromise to where all of the notes are as in tune as they can be with each other up and down the neck and with the open strings, as physics will allow. And I often cite, I'll, if I'm talking about this online, I usually link. There's a by now pretty famous video of James Taylor going over his tuning offsets, and he explains this whole process and why this is so, why guitars are like this, and why a tuning offset will help you sound much better. And it is sort of a night and day thing, and it's something that your ear will develop and learn. The more you learn, the more you'll realize this. But this is also probably why, for those many decades, I only used my ears to tune my guitars. A lot of times I might get when I was playing in my own bands and playing my own original music and stuff, I would usually just find I have fairly good relative pitch, so I could kind of tune by ear to standard tuning more or less, or I would get a pitch from a record for one of the strings, and then I would proceed to tune the rest of the guitar with what I didn't really know was an offset. I just knew that you had to tune the guitar sort of out of tune with itself in general, so that the whole guitar would be as in tune as possible. Like I used to play for a long time in an acoustic folk duo, me and a girl singer, and I would do a lot of sort of piano songs that I would arrange for acoustic guitar, and I would be playing chords down here. I'd be playing chords all the way up here because I'm trying to match piano things, And the only way you can really do that is to do like James Taylor, and you use a tuning offset, right? It's Peterson calls it a sweetened tuning, right? So and I also encourage people to go and look at Peterson's YouTube channel, look at their videos. Peterson explains the concept of sweetened tuning really better than I can, but they kind of explain sort of the physics behind it. And but the long and the short of it is, like I said, you're tuning the strings deliberately out of tune with each other as it relates to the exact chromatic pitch, right? It's not necessarily that you're going to be playing E flat. You're going to be playing E flat plus maybe 30 cents higher on this string, and you might be playing 20 cents lower on this string. It's a compromise, but it's thought out, it's planned, it's purposeful, it's not an accident. Wow. And like I said, Eddie, like James Taylor, almost certainly to me, and I don't have video of him doing this, but like I said, I know that I do have video of him tuning this way by ear. There's again this bootleg video of the 5150 vault during the little rehearsals with just the trio of Alex, Wolfgang, and Eddie, where Eddie's he tunes by ear for I believe for Running with the Devil, and Running with the Devil is the song that probably has the most complex alternate tuning that's never repeated in any other song. But a lot of people have falsely thought that Running with the Devil was simply tuning the B string down a little bit to get the major triad to sound more in tune. But that's not that simple. It's a very bizarre tuning with lots of different offsets on the different strings that make those harmonic runs, like those types of harmonic runs to actually sound as in tune as can possibly be. And that's not to do with just the B string. It's all the strings.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's a whole neat thing, because it, that, and there's even in Running with the Devil, there's times where if you were to just strum an E minor chord full out with that tuning that's going on in Running with the Devil, it would sound pretty bad. It would be pretty massively out of tune, because almost the whole song he's just doing, he's just up here for almost the whole song. The only time he's playing down at the nut is during the power chord sections that are going on during the solo, which is like that. They're just those. You can actually even hear on the record the very last thing he does at the end of the solo, before he goes back into the main riff, is he backwards strums this E minor chord. Well, the low E is so far out of tune and the high E is so far out of tune. You can hear it on the recording that when he strums down here, the chord sounds horrendously out of tune. But when he's playing the rest of the song, that it sounds perfectly in tune, and all the harmonic runs sound perfectly in tune, and the leads, even the lead guitar part, is really just those triads, more or less. That stuff is all in tune. But if you strum this chord, it's out of tune. And that's probably why for that one recording is so remarkably different in tuning than any other one. That tuning is not repeated in any other place on the first album. It's not played on any other song in the entire catalog, right? But say the tuning for Eruption, that the tuning that's going on Eruption is later repeated in the overdubs for Jamie's Crying. I figured this out many years ago, and I thought, well, that's interesting. He returned to that tuning when he did the overdubs for Jamie's Crying.
Uh-huh.
The main guitar track on Jamie's Crying has a different tuning.
Oh, wow.
So, that part has a different tuning than the overdubs at the end, than the lead overdubs at the end, That part is in a completely different tuning, and it works. I don't know why it works, but it does. On my channel, I've done a little demo of that where I used a looper to record the main guitar track in the tuning using my Ibanezdestroyer, which is what Eddie used to record the main track of Jamie's Crying. Then he did the overdubs with the Frankenstein in a different tuning, right? So I made a clip of myself doing the backing track on my Destroyer, and then I played the harmonies over the top using this guitar in the different tuning, and it works. And my little thing actually proves it works. If listening to the album doesn't do it for you, you can see me doing it on my channel. I've kind of demonstrated how that worked. Now, funny thing happened when Greg Renoff's excellent and indispensable book, Van Halen Rising, came out. He tracked down the details of the sessions. We got all the details from Greg Renoff, and I can't even thank Greg Renoff enough for all the work he's done. I mean, that guy is the ultimate Van Halen fan. That guy put it all together, and I don't know where we'd be without him. Our knowledge is so greatly increased by what Greg has done and the passion that he's put into his books.
Wow.
I can't say enough about Greg. He's a great guy, and boy, the work he's done is just, it's amazing. Anyway, the reason why I mentioned that is that because Greg tracked down the dates, and Sunset Sound later posted these things on their website, where they have the dates where they recorded specific tracks for the first album. And of course, Eruption was the last thing recorded for the album. The very last sessions for the album had just Eruption and the overdubs for Jamie's Crying.
Oh.
So the guitar was same tuning for Eruption was the same tuning for the overdubs on Jamie's Crying, and he played it on the same guitar. He played it on this guitar. So that's one thing, that the tuning.
Oh, wow.
Because it was two different sessions. They'd recorded the master track, the basic main track for Jamie's Crying way, weeks before. They came back later on and did the overdubs, which were the little harmonies at the end, which were recorded on this guitar. But that was an interesting thing. So that proved to me like, whoa, okay. The tuning for Eruption is the same as the overdubs on Jamie's Crying. It was recorded the same day. Eddie probably didn't even have to retune the guitar. He just probably played Eruption. And again, that was not planned for the record. That was just an add-on thing that Ted decided he wanted to put on the album when he heard Eddie warming up with it. They were just going to go in and do the overdubs probably for Jamie's Crying, but then Eddie's horsing around playing Eruption. They record it. But that's just an example of that specific tuning is repeated in Jamie's Crying, in the overdubs on Jamie's Crying. Now that same tuning appears later on the second album, on sessions that happened months down the road. That same tuning is repeated on Women and Children First on certain tracks. That was over a year down the road, right?
Wow.
So that's how I know that it's not an accident. If he's repeating that exact tuning and it's that exact, and I can. I'm notating it using the Peterson Strobo Plus HD. That's how I can say, it's not my opinion that Eddie, did this purposefully. There was a train of thought that people just thought that Eddie was an idiot savant. Like he was just somebody that was an alien that just did things in a way that no other human being could do it. It's not true. What he did was purposeful. It wasn't random. It wasn't just, I'm gonna tune the guitar the way I want to tune it, and then Mike, you tune to me, or Mike, give me an A, I will tune my guitar, and that's how we're just going to do it. We're not going to look at a strobe tuner. Eddie did say that in an interview where he said, I defy you to find a tuner around here. I just say, Mike, tune to me, and I just tune using my ear. Well, he may have said that at that point, but the facts are that he had the Peterson strobe tuner backstage at every show, on every tour, forever, on every show. Even when going until the day he died, he was using Peterson strobe tuners.
Wow.
They were, even if it wasn't him using it, even if he had his last tech, Tom, he was using the Peterson Strobo flip tuner on the very last tour, he didn't tune chromatically. It is what it is. It's not an opinion. It's just a fact that's borne out by the evidence. If all that makes any sense.
Man, it makes perfect sense. And I just want to do a couple of quick shout outs before we get, Brad was in the chat. Bro, if you're in the chat, I know he's traveling to a gig. I'm sorry I didn't do a shout out, but I can't interrupt Alan. so Nelson saying everything that I've learned is totally backward. Nelson has just been blown away and captivated by what you're articulating for us, Alan, and it's remarkable. So
thank you, guys.
Eddie Van Halen's not an alien, guys. You've heard it here. Eddie Van Halen was a man,
That's right.
was a guitar player and a musician who had it worked out and worked hard at it and thought about it and had a plan, and it was determined. And wow, he wasn't just thank you for bursting that bubble, because I think that's something that we need to remember and concentrate on when we go back and listen to this album, because after I've finished with you, I'm going to go back and listen to Van Halen 1 and it will be completely different because of this conversation. So the challenge that you have laid, Alan, and I say this humbly as a fellow Van Halen fan, and your colleagues with this transcript, anybody who is going to come out and write an in-depth biography has to include the technical aspect of Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing and his contribution. You can't write any definitive biography in the future without negotiating this. So the challenge that we have here on this channel right now, today, on this day, to any prospective author is you have to get in touch with Allen. You have to go to his channel. You have to include this kind of detail if you are going to contribute a biography. And I say that humbly.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I mean, yeah, I just think that the ultimate tribute to Eddie is that you just apply yourself as much as you can. I mean, Eddie played guitar almost all day, every day of his life. It was more time spent doing that than really anything else. And that's why he's arguably it. For me and me personally, it's just him and Jimi Hendrix. I don't see anybody else that's in that same league. And a really famous Nashville session player I was just talking about this the other day. It's really only Hendrix and Van Halen that really moved the needle,
yep,
so to speak, where they completely changed the way everybody played. I mean, yep. You could say that about Charlie Christian. You could say that about T-Bone Walker. That's kind of true for them. But I mean, really en masse, in a huge mass sense, you can really just say that it was Hendrix and Van Halen that did that. And with those guys, it wasn't an accident. Those guys worked harder than anybody else. They played all the time, probably to the detriment of their personal lives, to the detriment of being social, to the detriment of their mental health, probably. I mean, they took it, and I joke about it, but it may be that they took it further than is even healthy, and they gave it all they had, all the time, almost without sleeping, and it's just amazing. Like, and I just feel like that the best way to give a tribute to Eddie is to work as hard as you can on playing. Just work hard and play. And there's that famous video that popped up from the fan, where Eddie just says, just play, man, just play, and he repeats it several times. I'm going to come looking for you. Just play. And that's the truth. That's really the truth. That's his legacy. That's the legacy of Jimi Hendrix. It's not. It's not about anything else. It's not about tabloids. It's not about who's the singer. It's not how Hendrix died. It's not how. It's all about how, hey, it's just pure music. That's what Eddie was all about. That's what he always. That's the only thing that he cared about. That's what he really talked about. I mean, he loved his family. He loved his father. He loved his. He loved his son like you couldn't believe. Like we all know. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that Wolfgang would disagree with, or that anybody that was around him would disagree with. Alex has said in many interviews that it just bears it out. From the moment he goes to bed to the moment he wakes up, he's playing guitar almost that entire time. It's always around him. He's always playing. And that's why there's those giant vaults of unreleased noodling and riffs and things that's sitting in the 5150 studio right now, because that guy played to that level all the time for all the decades that we had him. It wasn't accidental. But the good news about that, realizing that, is that it's attainable for you. If you really want to learn how to play this stuff and you really want to get inside, you can do it. You just and it's not that hard. To learn how to play Van Halen music is not as hard to me as like learning how to play some Segovia, or it's not as hard as learning how to play like Ornette Coleman, or it's not as hard as Frank Zappa's music is infinitely more difficult than Eddie Van Halen's music. I mean, it is. But a lot of people, for some reason, they they just kind of give up and they shrug and they're like, oh, just that's Eddie. I can never be that good, but to me, it's a fun process. It's so rewarding. I mean, I remember I was showing you the Ice Cream Man lick earlier. I was playing the Ice Cream Man lick wrong for so many years. I knew it wasn't tapped. I had a rough approximation of how to sort of play it. My friend Bill showed me exactly how to play it. He taught me how to play that lick correctly, and he gave me the evidence behind it. And when he taught me that, this was probably about 2010. He wrote out a tab. He gave me the evidence for it. I kind of went back and forth with him, but every time I'd go back, he'd have the evidence and show exactly what he was talking about, and it made sense. And when Bill taught me that lick, I spent 6 months, several hours a day, probably 3 or 4 hours a day working on that one lick for 6 months. Now I can play the lick and it's no problem. It was not easy when I first did it, and you have to use specific fingers. It's not always necessarily the easiest finger to use, and it's just. That's the Ice Cream Man lick, and it's easy to me now, but it took me 6 months of just playing that one lick and nothing else for several hours a day for 6 months. And then I finally got it pretty well under my fingers, right? But it's not impossible, you have to put in the dedication to figure it out. But again, in the scheme of things, it's not that difficult, and it's really not that difficult once you see how Eddie did it. A lot of times, Eddie did not make things hard on himself. There are some things that, and originally I was going to discuss the entire Eruption transcription note for note, but part of the reason why I worked on Eruption specifically was that I wanted to get it out of the way.
You can come back. We'll have to schedule another show for you to do that.
No. I mean, the thing about Eruption is that Eruption is kind of hackneyed. Like, there's so many people that try to play it, and I really wanted to get it right, but I wanted to put it to bed, at least as well as I could, because there's so many more things in the catalog that are more important to learn than that. Like I said, I think I'm the One is probably more important to learn. Spanish Fly, if you want to look at one of his solo Spanish Flies, really pretty high on the difficulty level of actually really playing what's really actually going on in that recording is incredibly difficult on a whole other level from Eruption in certain ways. But anyway, that was like Eruption was a whole other thing. But I just wanted to get rid of that. I wanted to finish that, put that to bed. But I'm going to give you an example of how Eddie would think. I used to play the Ice Cream Man lick, the ending solo of Ice Cream Man. I have a clip of myself playing it on my channel just to kind of demonstrate it. But it was originally transcribed like up here using some strange slides and the notes were kind of sort of okay, but it was like a really difficult positioning. And this was how Wolf Marshall transcribed it, and Annie Alador kind of transcribed it up here. Very bizarre. And I used to play it like that for a couple of decades. But then I realized when I listened to Eddie's interview with Steven Rosen, where he goes over all these licks and solos, like, he goes over the ending solo of You Really Got Me, that. So he goes over that, and I was able to figure out that with the help of Bill. Bill helped me work on that little solo. But he plays the solo of Ice Cream Man, and you can, at the end, the ending solo. Eddie's literally, he's not doing some bizarre freeform jazz in weird positions and modes and scales. Eddie didn't really have a concept of that. The ending solo of Ice Cream Man is literally him just following the dots down each string.
Oh, wow.
So he's only following the 5th, 7th, and 9th frets. The ending solo, the. So that's what he's doing. That's it.
Wow.
that's not like jazz. That's not somebody that went to college. That's not somebody that knows how to read music.
Yeah.
That's just a guy looking at, oh, well, that sounds cool. And he's again using silent hammer-ons in the same way he's doing with that Eruption lick. He's only picking the first note, and you can hear it in the Steven Rosen interviews. He's going, and he's just playing that and transferring it down the rest of the strings. Wow. So isn't that interesting? I mean, that kind of gives you some insight as to what Eddie was doing. He wasn't picking every single note. He's letting this hand do the work, but it's also it's not even just that he's doing it because it's easy to do it. He's doing that, or at least the result of him doing that is that you've got so much more flavor and different articulation going on, because you have the sound of the one pick note, the upstroke. So you're doing the hammer. So it just that blows my mind. That's one of the best licks from Eddie, because it shows you the way he thought. But the result of it is it's not. He could have he could have done something crazy and just picked every single note. But the fluidity of it and the articulation and the feel and the soul of it comes from that. It comes from the fingering, and it's another result of it makes a difference where you put your hands on the instrument when you play a certain note. There's a different sound to playing an open string than there is to playing the fretted note. And there's a different sound when you make a hammer on as opposed to picking the note. This is why the tapping was such a big deal, because you're playing all these triplets, but it sounds different when you're doing nothing but hammering on, Now, the first time that was transcribed by Steve Vai transcribed it up here. He was transcribing it on the G string. That's definitely not right. Oh. The whole tapping segment is done completely on the B string, but it took decades before anybody corrected that in a different transcription. Later on, Wolf Marshall did the transcription where he put the tapping on the B string, so that he got that correct. So that was another leap forward, because he was doing the trills, the regular trills down the G string, but then he jumps over to the B string to begin the tapping segment. So and then he reaches over while he's doing the trill, and he starts the tapping on the B string. So he starts the tapping. So
oh, wow.
So that was kind of a one little thing right there. But that was a major thing right then, because if you were to try to do the tapping, let's see, what is it? I don't even remember how to do it on the G string anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how he did it on the G string, but that's a totally different tone when you're playing it on the G string versus playing it on the B string. It's much more like rubber band like and fluid when you play the tapping segment on the B string. That's one little thing that makes a huge difference. The tapping segment isn't really difficult. Anybody can do it, and frequently they'll show 6-year-old kids getting on a guitar and playing.
Yeah.
Playing it. It's not that it's hard, but if you think it's done on the G string and then you don't realize that, it's done on the B string, because there wasn't any video of him playing it for decades. There was no video really of him playing that, and that was available to anybody until Live Without a Net came out. So that was the other really big project that I did. Yeah, that one. So one of the first long form transcriptions that I did, I transcribed the entire Live Without a Net solo back in 1997. And on my channel, you'll see a little audio recording that I did of myself playing that in one live take. I basically I finished the transcription, and then I played the whole thing. I think I tried to play it twice, and the second time was the one that I kept it. And I used an old cassette dictation machine. Of course, this is 1997. There's no digital recording. I couldn't even afford like a Fostex 4-track cassette recorder or anything. I said an old cassette dictation machine. I hammered it on and just started playing, right? And I didn't have any effects except for the echo that I used on Cathedral, and I had a distortion pedal. I had an MXR Distortion Plus, and that was it. And I played it with my Kramer Striker, but but that one, at least when I was working on that, at least I had the video to work with. That was back in 1997. You know, it took me about 3 months to get that whole thing completely finished. But you know, the other people that were working on transcribing his stuff didn't have any video of him until Live Without a Net, really, you know, to speak of. So at least that was the first time that I realized, oh my God, it's on the B string. You know, until I saw it on Live Without a Net, I didn't know for sure. You know, and then it was like, oh, that was another ding dong moment. You know, it's like, oh, it's not on the B string. You know, I mean, and again, that's an example of how Steve Vai didn't have a guitar in front of him when he was originally transcribing it. You know, I think if he had a guitar when he was actually working on it, instead of just listening to it and writing it down, he probably would have figured out that it was on the B string and not on the G string.
Okay.
You know?
How important then are these videos that we've had since, you know, a different kind of truth, the tours? So obviously, you know, the high quality videos of these concerts from the fans and the official. So they've made a lot of probably the theories that you've had and some of your colleagues. This is right. Yeah. So we're on the right track here because there's there's video of Eddie doing it this way. So that must have been pretty satisfying, Alan, to get that.
Oh yeah, and as we said before, it's that was really a major thing because they're playing all of these deep cuts that they never played live, and or they hadn't played live in many years, and there's no video evidence of them playing those songs live. You know, so there's things like say Atomic Punk, like. A lot of people play. Eddie never played it like that. If you actually look at the videos, you can see, say like the Fresno '79 videos that came out. It's not on the Different the Truth tour, but on the Fresno video, the '79 video where he's playing that on this, I believe he's playing it on the Dragon Snake guitar. He plays that entire thing down here, so you know he's going. And you can see it. You know, his hand's not up here. His hand's down here for the whole time he's playing that. You know, that whole thing, and that's just an easy thing to see, even in a grainy 8mm footage. You can see that when he's playing those licks, he's down here, he's not up here.
Cool.
You know, so that's just a major thing right there.
Yep.
Now, when you go to the A Different Kind of Truth tour, then you have things like you get to see video of him playing Drop Dead Legs. Well, originally, Drop Dead Legs was recorded on a 1958 Flying V. I have a reissue right here. A lot of people and all the transcribers thought that the main riff had a whammy bar in it. There's no whammy bar in the whole song. It was played on this Stop Tail 1958 Flying V. And so when you look at the A Different Kind of Truth videos where he's playing Drop Dead Legs, you can see how he's playing it with just bends and slides, right? And I had figured that out, and again, kind of in conversation with some of my other friends on the forums. I mean, going back to like 2010, I think was when I first got on. I was on the old classic vanhalen.com.
Yep.
I was on there, and I figured out how Eddie played that. I think me and another guy probably figured that out, and still no one was playing it right for many, many, many years. And people were reluctant to let go of thinking that Eddie played everything on the Frankenstein, or that Eddie always played something on a Super Strat with a Floyd Rose. You know, but when you do the research and you read the interviews, you realize Well, almost all of 1984 was recorded with the 1958 Flying V.
Yeah.
You know, it was the entire main track of Drop Dead Legs. The lead guitar on the outro on Drop Dead Legs is not. It's probably the original Frankenstein, because that's got Floyd Rose on it. So Drop Dead Legs, almost the entire song is just this. And then Hot for Teacher is just the Flying V. And then Girl Gone Bad is just the Flying V. And there's even like an overdub. One of the very first lead fills in Girl Gone Bad. Let me see. I'm trying to remember which. Yeah, let's see. That first little fill. People transcribed that as being a whammy bar lick, because they thought he was going.
Oh.
And they thought he was, you know, like he was doing a whammy bar thing, but it's not. He was just doing it with slides and bends. You know, that whole thing. So, but that's an interesting example of why I like to use an instrument that's as close to what Eddie actually used on the recording as possible. So when I worked on Girl Gone Bad and Hot for Teacher, I got this 1958 reissue Flying V.
Beautiful.
And so it really informed, you know, I was able
beautiful.
to play the song correctly. You know, I was able to use the pickup switch to flip to the neck pickup for the quiet parts, the Lagrange parts of Hot for Teacher. Same thing with Girl Gone Bad. You know, all those songs that use that. You know, a lot of people get a 58 Flying V or a reissue 58 Flying V, because nobody except Joe Bonamassa and like 3 other guys in Nashville, you know, afford a real one. And Eddie, you know, could get a real one. A lot of people get a reissue one because, you know, they really like, say, like Albert King. You know, Albert King's the most famous. You know, he's the most famous user of the Flying V, and even Billy Gibbons used the Flying V on the Fandango album, and you know, there's other reasons, but you know, I'm the guy that got a 58 reissue Flying V because of Eddie, because I loved the songs that Eddie did with the Flying V, and there was something so sort of magical about it. You know, I even theorized that it's possible that Eddie used the Flying V for the solo to Jump. Awesome. Because there is no tremolo bar in Jump.
I love your Derek and the Dominoes guitar strap too.
Oh yeah, that's one of the old. I have a thing for vintage Ace straps, so I've got quite a few. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, that's a real vintage Ace strap, and I have quite a few of those. And in fact, as I've said before, I'm actually probably more into Led Zeppelin than Van Halen. So I've got a whole bunch of Jimmy Page obsession going on. And I mean, I've got the exact Ace guitar strap that he used in the Yardbirds and the first Led Zeppelin recordings. Wow. And the whole, I've got that's a whole other set of issues that I have to deal with. So. You know. So that's another thing why I got, you know, why I used this guitar when I worked on Eruption, you know, to be able to get the exact right pitches and to understand how the thing was originally played. I don't use a Floyd Rose system. You know, I just use a regular standard vintage Fender's vibrato bar, and I've kind of tricked it out. I've done some modifications to it, some of which were things that Eddie did. Some things are things that I've done. I use locking tuners, Sperzo locking tuners with graduated height posts. Wow. But Eddie essentially accomplished the same thing with his guitar by wrapping the strings in a different way so that he could get different heights on the strings on the other side of the nut. So different strings. Yeah. So he would wind the strings in a different way.
Wow.
So he would do that to eliminate the need for having a string tree. If you look on Eddie's original guitar, he had a string tree on it, but it doesn't, the strings don't touch the string tree. The string tree, Eddie mentioned in an interview that the string trees that Fender uses the strings can get caught up in them and cause the guitar to go out of tune. Well, what was Eddie's answer to that and he would basically wind the strings in a different way to where the height of the string would be such that he wouldn't need to have a string tree.
Wow.
But you see a string tree on Eddie's guitar, and what he did, and we find this out. I decided to put a string tree because I even though I'm not, the strings aren't being touched by the string tree, I wanted the guitar to look like Eddie's, right? So I wanted to still have a string tree.
Sure.
So I went ahead and put one. But what I found out was that if you use only one string spacer and you raise the height of the string tree to where it doesn't touch the strings at all, it doesn't want to stay on there. So I ended up using 2 string spacers in order to get the string tree to sit still, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the EVH Fender 78 Eruption, very expensive replica, and they ended up doing the same thing that I did. I didn't know this. I don't know that I don't think they got it from me. I think Eddie probably did it, but it wasn't something that he revealed in an interview or anything. But you see it on the 78 Eruption replica. He uses 2 spacers on the string tree, and the strings don't touch the string tree at all. So the string tree is eliminated as a possible way that the strings would go out of tune. And then, of course, Eddie's famous for using the brass nut on the original Frankenstein neck, or really the second neck that was on the Frankenstein. I use a Tusk XL nut, which is it's one of those things like 1,000 times slipperier than graphite, it says. Then I also use Big Ben's nut sauce in the grooves, and I've got the nut cut in a specific way to kind of help with binding, and I just done a bunch of other specific mods to this to make it work. But the crux of Eddie's tremolo use was that he only, even when he used the Floyd Rose, he had it set up to dive only. It's not a floating bridge.
Yep.
A lot of fans know this by now. But the interesting thing that I discovered when I was really trying to figure out how did Eddie keep the guitar in tune, well, anytime Eddie would bend over here or just play, do some licks, there would be a point at which he would dive with the bar. And Eruption is a key point of that, right? So we know that there are times when, say in the introduction, he's just, Well, what is Eddie doing right there? Yeah, he's doing something musical, and he's doing like a freaky sound effect, and it's got the low growling, and but that process gets the guitar back in tune. If you've done anything over here with your regular playing or bending that has potentially knocked the guitar out of tune, if you dive with the bar, it automatically resets the strings.
Wow.
So this is something that Eddie did. And again, Eddie used a regular Fender tremolo on the first 2 Van Halen albums. So Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2, if there's tremolo work on it, it was entirely done with a Fender style tremolo. And it's always with a dive, and the dives occur in such a spot to where it enables the guitar to come back in tune if it's been knocked out at all by what you're doing with your regular playing.
Wow.
So that was something that I came to know only because I decided, well, I'm going to do exactly how Eddie did it. I'm not going to learn Eruption using a Floyd Rose. I'm going to use a real vintage Fender tremolo. And that was one of those things that started making sense. And, when I would listen to the live bootlegs, Eddie was constantly just in between songs. He was always doing that in between songs when Dave is talking, and, if they're not going directly into the other song, you can always hear him doing that, and what was he doing? Eddie was just getting the guitar back in tune. That's the whole trip. You do that a couple of times. I mean, listen to this guitar. I've just been playing the hell out of it and just, wanging it all over the place. But, listen, it's perfectly in tune. I mean, and I can play on this thing for hours and hours and it will not go out of tune. It just won't. But that's only because I learned that that's how, and that's especially because I'm playing, if I'm playing Van Halen music, I'm playing stuff the way he played it. It would always resolve to where there was a point where, like even at the end of the songs, like, you know, like, well, it was like Ain't Talking About Love, you know, he just does the big Hendrix chord at the end of Ain't Talking About Love, and he's just. So he does that dive before he hits another big chord. Well, that chord is in tune because he just did a big dive, you know? So that was a whole other trip about learning how he did what he did using the standard Fender tremolo, and why it serves me personally better as somebody that's trying to transcribe the music, to use the guitar that's as close to what was used on the record as possible. So on Van Halen 1, it was basically just the original Frankenstein in this condition, and then it was the Ibanezdestroyer, and I have a vintage 76, 75 era Ibanezdestroyer that I also used to work out the other songs, like You Really Got Me and On Fire and Running with the Devil and Feel Your Love Tonight. That was all done with the Destroyer. I've got one of those. And his playing is different on the Destroyer, because when he's playing on the Destroyer, he starts doing like all these crazy wide bends. Like on You Really Got Me, he's just doing some really crazy wide bends that he wouldn't ordinarily do on this guitar, because those bends would just make the go out of tune more easily.
Makes perfect sense. Yes, of course.
Like, so Eddie, like in You Really Got Me, he does that thing at the end of the solo where he bends up from the 9th fret on the G string up to, he does. Yeah, he bends up 2 whole steps from the 9th fret to the 12th fret, and he actually catches some of the other D string underneath there. So he does that, and he gets feedback, and then he does the toggle switch thing with the Ibanezdestroyer toggle switch, right? Well, he's doing things like that in You Really Got Me, and he does that in On Fire, you know. Well, and On Fire, at the end of that lick, he's bending up from the 12th fret. He's bending up he's bending up 2.5 steps at the end of that lick from the beginning of On Fire. Well, he's doing that, and he doesn't have to worry about going out of tune, because he's doing it on that fixed bridge Ibanezdestroyer. He's not doing it on the Fender Strat, right? Now, I just did that on this guitar, but watch this. I'm just going to do the bar and see it's still in tune. I just did that crazy wide bend, you know. Now I just did that, and now the guitars. See, it's still in tune. But that's the trick, you know. You have to use the bar, you know. And Eddie said in an interview, he's like, you know, people asked him how he kept the Fender tremolo in tune, and he gave some tips. He didn't give everything away. Like he used super bullet strings. He didn't give that away. The only reason I found out he even used super bullet strings, I used them myself because I know they work better in the Fender tremolos to stay in tune, but he never said that in an interview. But when the 78 Eruption Relic came out, they included vintage Fender or replicas of vintage Fender Super Bullet strings in the case candy with that guitar. So you know that Eddie was also using bullet strings to keep the Fender Strat trem in tune, right? Now, I had just done that on my own, but I just kind of got confirmation when that guitar came out. Again, same thing with the double spacers on the string tree. When that 78 Eruption came out, I got confirmation that that's another thing that Eddie did, you know, to make the tremolo stay in tune. And, you know, he always said he really liked the sound of the Fender tremolo better for a long time, you know. And then he got better. The metals and the bigger blocks and the Floyd Roses got to get better and better tone, and he got to be more satisfied with that. And it's not necessarily for me a better or worse thing. It's just a different thing.
Sure.
You know, the Floyd Rose does that complete full slack thing. You can't do that on a Fender tremolo, right?
No.
But you get that full slack thing like you hear on Women and Children First. The first album that has a Floyd Rose tremolo is the Women and Children First album. And you hear that on you know, like on Tora Tora, that thing. Johnny Bean does a great video of him demonstrating how to play that backwards guitar part with the Floyd Rose. Well, that's depressing all the strings with the Floyd Rose. Well, you can't do that with a Fender tremolo, right? So there's, it's if I'm transcribing something from Women and Children First or the later albums that used a Floyd Rose, then I have a guitar with a Floyd Rose on it, and the same thing on Women and Children First. There's tracks like Take Your Whiskey Home that were done with the Chris Holmes Destroyer, which is, exactly like Ed's original Destroyer. And you can see how he's also doing those ultra wide bends on Take Your Whiskey Home that he wouldn't normally do on one of these kind of guitars with a tremolo on it, So those are kind of things that, that are kind of helpful. So that's kind of part of my process there that nobody asked about, but I'm giving some insight as to why I use what I use. And then with the Eruption transcription, I use some vintage pieces. One of the things I worked on with my buddy Mark Bonta, Bonta, Mark Bonta, he and I worked on the Univox EC80 Echo box, and we figured out through trial and error and changing different parts that Eddie was doing the dive at the end of Eruption as he said he did with that Univox. He would get the unit to oscillate, which is just basically just a continuous, infinite, kind of almost like a feedback loop of the note that he played at the 12th fret, natural fret harmonic, right? Just played as a regular natural, anytime like you're playing a regular harmonic at the 12th fret of the low E string. Well, all it was, he had said in interviews that he got a different motor that made it go slower, and that would give you the full octave dive, basically. Well, Mark and myself found out that was not the case. That was kind of a little fib that he did tell, because the only thing that really does that consistently is changing the pot. There's an echo delay knob on the Univox EC80A, and that echo delay knob, if you change the pot to a different value, and in my transcription, I've actually included that information in the transcription in the magazine that shows the value pot that you need to get. I don't even remember what it was, because Mark and I went back and forth, and Mark was the one that hit on it. And then we kind of both agreed that that's what it was. Okay. Yeah, it's a 25K pot on the echo delay knob. So if you replace the original pot, which I believe might have been like a 5K pot, something like a lower value. But if you replace it with the 20, hey, Kurt, what's happening, man?
Hey, guys.
Hey, good to see you. Glad you could jump on.
Yeah, you bet. I didn't even look at the time, Andrew. I thought we were at our normal time, so I'm a little bit late. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's cool. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, carry on.
But yes, as I was saying about that, about the dive at the end of Eruption, it's all about changing the pot, and you can perform the full octave dive. If you use the stock pot, you won't reach the full octave when you're doing the dive at the end of the song. So that's all that Eddie did. He would hit the harmonic, he'd raise up the one knob that gets the oscillation, and then he would dive with the other knob that would bring it down in pitch. So just about everybody, that does an Eruption cover, they always end the piece by using their whammy bar. But of course, that's not right. It's done with the delay. It's done with the Univox EC80A, and specifically, it's done by changing that pot value and doing that. And that was something that people realized that he did it, but nobody had ever worked out how he did it. So me and my friend Mark worked it out, and we had two. He had two vintage units. I had two vintage units. And we just kind of kept trying different parts, going back and forth, making videos for each other, and, kind of each assessing each other's results. And then, Mark was the one that actually hit on the right value. And when he'd try that and he'd go, "Oh, is that right?" And I go, "Yeah, man, that's it. That's the one. That's the sound, And I might shoot you a link to those. You can see Mark actually, I can send you links to the clips that Mark sent me, where he hit on it, and Mark just nails it. It's unbelievable how exactly he got that dive, and anybody can do it with a vintage unit. Now, those vintage units are horrible, and they break down, and even back then, it makes sense why Eddie never used them again after that first couple of tours. And that's why you don't see the World War II practice bomb with the Univox EC80s, after 1979. And even late in 1979, he ditched those things because they're totally unreliable. And you can do that trick with a lot of other delays. I do it a lot. I prefer to use my I have an old late 70s Electro Harmonics Deluxe Memory Man, and I use that for the octave dive a lot too. It's so much more reliable and just works better, and it sounds, in my opinion, just as good. But that was kind of another little fun detail that we put in the transcription. That's a detail that's never been included in any other transcription. And again, and I think you're going to have a link to where people can actually go and see the magazine, where people can look at the transcription and kind of go through it note for note. And,
I've got that in the chat up at the top. But, if you send any links, Al, that you want, we'll put them on this video so that people can go and have a look directly at your videos.
Great.
Is there anything, Kurt, that you want to ask? Alan?
Yeah, Alan, on that subject of the Univox, I'm assuming, what year was that when you guys did those videos?
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
I think that Mark and I were working on that back in, it might have been like 2011.
Yeah, okay. Because later on, those videos came out for the 78 tour, where it showed Eddie after the Eruption solo, where he went up to the bomb and adjusted those units, and then he took his guitar off and set it next to the speaker and then switched guitars. We really didn't know that until those videos came out. You know? No, we lost Alan. He might be switching his camera. So who do we have out here in the chat? We got Lloyd, Nelson, Mark, Teresa. Looks like Brad came in and said hi. Jamie H2O. Uh-oh, we lost Alan. He'll jump back in. So what I missed, guys, since I'm on here by myself, did Alan show some guitars? I saw the Flying V back there on this couch, pretty sweet. I'm not sure if Alan showed his Ibanezdestroyer, but he has a awesome replica of Eddie's Destroyer before he painted it and chopped it up. And if I were to make one, I would definitely make the same one that Alan put together, because that thing is sweet for sure. What's up, Nelson? How you doing? Hey, Mark. You guys got any questions for me since I'm on here by myself? Go ahead and shoot them out.
Hey,
there it is.
What happened?
My laptop
I was on by
battery ran
myself.
out.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I had to go to the little boy's room.
No, that's I'm sorry.
happened to me
Yeah,
out
my laptop battery ran out. Yeah,
Oh.
no. To answer your question, you were talking about the video, the 78 video from Fresno that came out. Yeah, that had been out for a while, but we knew that dive was done with the Univox because Eddie mentioned it in the very first interview. We knew that, and when you could hear it in the videos, right? Or you could hear it in the bootlegs. But in the live bootlegs, I don't believe that he necessarily changed the pot, because a lot of times in the bootlegs where you can hear him playing with the Univox, he's kind of using it as more of like a freak out type of thing to get sort of like spaceship sounds with it and really kind of playing with it more than he does on the record. He doesn't necessarily just do the full octave dive and that's it. He's really working it, right?
Tinkering with it. Yeah.
So we couldn't tell by those live bootlegs whether he had done what he did with that particular unit that he used on the album. But we knew that on the album, the only way that you could get that full octave dive was to change that pot and use a 25K pot. So that that was kind of the mystery, behind that. And to that end, I was just, the only reason I was even bringing that up, and I don't have my Destroyer right in front of me right now. It's up in my wife's office, in what's my guitar room, which is now my wife's office since we've been working from home. But
we're going to be rated, guys, by the Johnny Bean rat bags.
Oh, my good buddy. And shout out. There you go.
Johnny Bean Raid.
I love Johnny. Johnny's so super cool. He's given everybody a platform, and you know we know we all owe everything that we do, that we get to talk about this stuff, and you know, and have good buddies out there. It's all because of Johnny Bean and
Eddie.
David. You know, it's Johnny Bean and David Nesdahl that really made the great shows and gave us. You know, you can't take anything away from those guys. They're the OGs of this. And you know, thank you, Johnny, for everything that you do and continue to do. And our buddies Rob Johnson and David Nesdahl, we love those guys for sure.
Yep. Yeah, that's where I first saw you. Alan was on Johnny's shows.
Well, that was the first time
sure.
I'd ever done any kind of like web chat thing, and that was jumping on Johnny's, you know, when I could back in the day before I had children.
Right.
This is why you haven't seen me, you know. And then
and I remember
I don't have my
on too when you had when your first kid was fairly young. I remember you had to jump off.
First time I went on, yes, you could see her running by. Now she's 6 years old, but at that time she was like 8 months or something. You know, she was just kind of rocketing by. But so I don't have my Destroyer right in front of me that you mentioned. But you know, I was kind of going over why it is that I use like those specific guitars. You know, like I try to use what Eddie used on the recordings when I'm figuring things out. You can see I've got my Ovation back here because I'm working on trying to get Spanish Fly right. And well, Eddie used a 70s Ovation, no cutaway, like this one. Okay. Yeah. And the song is incredibly difficult to play to begin with, but when you're playing on the stuff that's the 12th fret and higher, it's murder. I mean, it is murder. So you know, if I had any sense, I would have gotten one with a cutaway, but I wanted to be able to do it the way Eddie did it, which is on a non-cutaway model, right? So that's what I got, you know.
Wow.
So that's kind of some extra dedication that's more painful than anything else, but you know, it gives you an appreciation of how Eddie did what he did. You know, he's not taking necessary, you know, this is before, I think it was before they even had cutaway Ovations at all. At that time, you know, and it was just a cheap thing. It wasn't even his guitar. I think it was one that he had borrowed from somebody. May have been, we don't know for sure. It may have been Ted's Ovation rather than Eddie's.
Right.
Ted Templeman.
Templeman.
I'm ribbing Kurt rather than.
I got a friend with Templeton name, so it's hard to get it straight.
Well, but anyway, yeah. So, any other questions? I am going to have to jump off and go get my kids. I brought them over to my mother-in-law's house so I could have a chance to jump on and pour my guts out here to everybody. But any other questions before I leave? I'm happy. I've still got several minutes. I can answer anything anybody might have.
Yeah, I know Cobra Kai. He mentioned he wanted a Destroyer, but if it's up in your office.
Yeah, I don't have it. I don't have it with it. You can see it on my channel. I've done a couple of demo videos with it, though. There's a demo video of me playing that ending solo from Ice Cream Man, and I'm doing that on my Destroyer, and a couple. And you can see it in my little Jamie's Crying clips where I'm demonstrating the different tunings on the Jamie's Crying tracks using my looper. You can see it there really well. But that was the whole thing. That was a whole journey. And you can read about that. I might send some links for that too. But that was a whole story about me. A lot of what's known about the Destroyer, I kind of found everything I could find on the internet about it, and then in the process of me finding one on, you know, I found a really good deal on a vintage one, and I started trying to figure out what was Eddie's like at the time of the recording of the first album. And in the process of that, I got in touch with the one photographer that I knew that had taken some clear black and white pictures of the Destroyer, and that was a photographer by the name of Marvin Renning. Mm-hmm. And through email correspondence, I said, yeah, I don't know what this is. You know, I don't quite know what these knobs are. You've got the best pictures out there, but you know, I have a vintage Destroyer. I'm trying to make it in the image of what Eddie's was at the time of the recording of the album. And, Marvin wrote back to me. He says, well, I can tell you exactly what those knobs were. And this is before there were clear pictures of it. But he told the story that when he was in the club shooting the band, he had talked to Eddie between sets. And Eddie said that he took the knobs from one of his Stratocasters and put them on the Destroyer. And then took the knobs that he had on his Stratocaster and put them on, or took the knobs that he had on his Destroyer and put it on the Strat. So you'll see in some pictures out there, and those pictures come from Marvin, of the Sunburst Strat that he's playing has some funky speed knobs.
Oh,
so he had those weird speed knobs on the Destroyer for a time, not the original knobs, but he had some speed knobs that he'd put on it at the time. So that's how he ended up putting the Strat knobs on the Destroyer, and that's what it was like for the recording of the album, because those pictures were taken right around that exact time of the recording of the album. And so in my email correspondence with Marvin said, well, guess what? You're not going to believe this. I've got a roll of film that I took that I've never developed from back then. He dug around. He found a whole roll of color film. There had been no color pictures available at the time of the Destroyer during that time period. So he found color photos from, I believe it was the Starwood, and they were incredible, up close, full, just in your face, clear shots of the guitar. And those photos had never been seen by anyone, not even the photographer, until I mentioned it to the photographer, and me even talking about it just kind of got his mind going, oh, I think I've got another roll of film somewhere. And he didn't really, it wasn't even in his mind that anybody would even care, and he dug it up, developed it, sent me some small thumbnails of it. And my jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And so I said, you don't understand what these things are. These are incredible. You've got to get these to a guitar magazine. Somebody's going to want to publish these things. And sure enough, Marvin did that. I bought some prints from him. I posted some small, so that I wouldn't, mess over the photographer and his rights to the pictures. I had just taken some cropped
snips,
parts, and posted those on the forums when I was making my Destroyer in the image of that Destroyer. And it was probably about 9 or 10 months later that those photos first appeared in Guitar World. So there's an issue of Guitar World. I want to say Zakk Wylde or Ozzy's on the cover. I can't remember which year and issue it was, but the first time those pictures were ever published was in that Guitar World. And then later on, the rest of those shots ended up getting on the internet. People had bought prints from Marvin and then taken them and posted them online. So all of the clear pictures that you see, the color pictures of the Starwood, of the Sunburst Strat, of the Destroyer, is all I love that comment from Robot Master Switch. Yes. So that's kind of an interesting thing about the Destroyer and how I came to do what I did with it, and I learned a lot about that guitar. And then the only full 110% confirmation that the guitar was in the white painted phase, the unsharked, unmolested, relatively unmolested phase during the recording of the first album was when Greg Renoff came out with the only picture from the recording of the first album that's in the Ted Templeman autobiography. That one picture that came from Don Landy. I had asked Greg about it as soon as I saw the picture. Greg had posted it. I asked Greg where he got it. Greg said he had gotten it from Landy. And, it's proof positive that he was playing the white painted, uncut Destroyer in the sessions for the first album. And it was determined that I believe they were recording Jamie's Crying in that picture. Yeah. So they're recording the main track of Jamie's Crying in that picture because the main track was the Destroyer. And then again, the overdubs that came later were done on the regular Frankenstein.
Right.
So that's a little background about the Destroyer and my Destroyer, why it looks the way it looks, and why there's good pictures of it now, because there weren't before. There was one very, very distant, like Kodak Instamatic picture that was taken from the back of the hall at the Whiskey. That was the only color picture, but you couldn't even tell if it was silver or white or whatever. It was so far away. And then there were black and white pictures. Yeah. And then there were some black and white pictures that Marvin had already had out. Right. But even those ones weren't actual up close of the entire guitar. So you didn't really see what was going on in the rest of the guitar. So that's, yet another example, but I do that probably with everything that I study. And again, I'm way more into Led Zeppelin than I am Van Halen. So
wow.
So I have a Harmony Sovereign H1260 6-string acoustic, which was used to record Stairway to Heaven and all of the third album. So I have that and I use that when I'm studying the parts. Like I did a transcription and cover of Bronnerar, the little acoustic guitar solo. It's on Physical Graffiti. It was recorded for the third album, and Jimmy played the Harmony Sovereign H1260 on it. So if you look on my channel, I have a cover of that song that I recorded with that exact guitar using a pick and metal thumb, plastic thumb pick and metal finger picks. Just the plastic thumb pick and bare fingers for the rest of the song. So like I got that specific guitar to learn those specific songs. I have a 65 Fender electric 12-string, which is one of the electric 12 strings that Jimmy used on Stairway to Heaven. It's the guitar that he used for the entire track of When the Levee Breaks, and it's the guitar that he used on The Song Remains the Same, the album version. So I have one of those, and then I have a B bender. I have a 1977 Brown B bender Telly that has an actual B bender that's installed by Gene Parsons, the same guy that installed the B bender in Jimmy Page's guitar. So like I got that so I could study, the In Through the Outdoor songs like Hot Dog and All My Love. And he used it live on 10 Years Gone in 77. With Led Zeppelin, I've learned everything that Led Zeppelin ever did on the album versions. And then I've also learned all the live bootleg arrangements. So I started collecting the live bootlegs of Led Zeppelin going back to when I was about 13, 14. So if I'd ever learn an album version, I'd go and find like the best live versions of it that I could, and then I'd learn that whole live arrangement. So like in my cover of Bronnerar, I'm playing the live arrangement that was done on the Blueberry Hill September 4th, 1970 show at the LA Forum from Led Zeppelin. So that's kind of why you could say I take the Jimmy Page thing is to a way sicker and more bizarre degree than the Van Halen thing. Because like I've learned everything they've ever done on record, and then everything, basically all the live arrangements of all the songs. There's only one other person that I know that's kind of gone that crazy with it, and that's the Jimmy Sakurai, who's the Japanese Jimmy Page tribute act, who plays with Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin Experience. Led Zeppelin Evening is the band, the cover band right now. But he's the only other guy that I know of in the world that's kind of done that kind of craziness. But I won't put on a wig and get dressed up like Jimmy in the dragon suit and all that. I'll leave that to Jimmy Sakurai.
There you go. Well, I think you answered my question I was going to ask you about what other guitars you have or have, I guess, put together since your hiatus on YouTube. So that's pretty cool that you also have, another passion with Led Zeppelin.
Oh yeah, a whole lot of Led Zeppelin stuff, and I've learned there's a lot of artists that I listen to. I mean, I love Hendrix. I've learned a lot of Hendrix. Stevie Ray Vaughan was a big deal for me. Some people know I met Stevie Ray Vaughan when I was 18 years old. I met him about 3 months before he passed away, maybe 2 months before he died, and I got to spend about 45 minutes with him. And he was a huge influence in my life, and so I studied a lot of Stevie Ray, a lot of the live recordings. Even back then, I'd learned a lot of the live solos note for note from just recording them off TV. When he'd do a concert that would appear on TV, I'd have my VHS out and I'd learn it. So by the time I met Stevie, I said, "Oh my God, I learned that entire show note for note." And you go, "Oh yeah, that was a good one." So I mean, there's a lot of Stevie Ray. Me, I love Pink Floyd. I've got a whole kind of gamut of stuff that I really like, and a bunch of guitars. I mean, I'm probably up to about 20 guitars at this point. I've got Awesome. I've got the electric 12-string. I've got a nice acoustic 12-string, and my first and main guitar is my 1968 Fender Strat. that I got from my uncle, which I told that story at the beginning of this broadcast. But that's my first and main guitar, and that was like the only electric guitar I had for a long time. In 1987, I got a reissue 57 gold top Les Paul that cost a lot of money for me. That ended up getting pawned for $50 by an ex-girlfriend of mine. So that wasn't a pleasant experience. Yeah. And never to be seen again. Everybody's got a story. That's about.
I know you gotta go.
I'm going to try to answer Cobra Kai's question he had about.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, in the Destroyer. Now, I don't know, but I can hazard a guess. For me, I don't really care how many pickups were in the Destroyer. I only really care about what I think may have been in the Destroyer at the time that he was recording the first album, because those are the only songs that really matter to me with the Destroyer. Now, I believe that he may have actually recorded Out of Love Again from the second album using the sharked version of the Destroyer. I'm pretty certain he did, because it's a non-tremolo song, and when I play it on my Destroyer, everything just sits right. I believe that he used the shark on Out of Love Again specifically, possibly on the main track of Bottoms Up, I believe could be the Shark Destroyer. But to me, the best tone, and to Eddie, I would agree that the best tone recorded of that Destroyer was on the first album. And so from what I can tell, and this is a guess, this is sort of an educated guess, I think that it may have been the stock Super 70s pickups that were in the Ibanezdestroyer were what was in the guitar when it was being used to record the first album. That's a guess. My guess is educated somewhat by the fact that it's got the pickup covers still on it.
I think you're right.
And on both pickups. Now, he didn't. It was only the bridge pickup that was wired up. I don't think he had the neck pickup wired up on the Destroyer then. But whenever Eddie swapped pickups, he never put the pickup cover on.
Yeah.
There were some times where he had PAFs. I know that I believe that he probably took PAFs out of maybe the Sunburst, one of the Sunburst Les Pauls. He might have stuck that in the Chris Holmes Destroyer, possibly, because that might be a PAF that's sitting in that, because the pickup cover is on with that.
And he took one of the pickups out.
Yeah. Yeah. In those pictures,
when he returned it, I was wondering, and you'd maybe just trying to trump my theory, but I was wondering maybe if he took one of the pickups out of Chris Holmes and either put it back in the Shark to try to re-emulate that tone, because maybe he had swapped pickups prior to the recording of that album and he was trying to get that Super Destroyer sound back. Or
I think that's certainly possible. That's certainly
you
possible.
never know.
I think he had so many pickups. He clearly, and he said in interviews that he tried many different pickups to try to get it sound like it did, and it didn't have an effect, because it was about the cutting of the wood that screwed up the sound of the Destroyer, and that's why he borrowed the Chris Holmes Destroyer for the Women and Children First album, right? And then but basically my thought is that for the real tones that matter from the first album, probably the Super 70 was the real deal pickup that was in that. And then later on, he probably I believe he put a DiMarzio Super Distortion in there, the cream colored one that's in the Shark that you see. That's 100%. I think that's probably 100% what he used in that phase for most of its life. I think
it may not even been wired up. He could have put it in there for a photo shoot. You never know.
Well, no. I think the DiMarzio probably was being used in this truck, because when he used it live, it had that Super Distortion in it. So when you see those live pictures of him playing the Sharked version, the cut up version of the red painted version, you'll see that he's using. It's going to be probably the Super Distortion in it. Or it may be the Mighty Mite clone of the Super Distortion that's in that guitar for most of the time. Now, you'll also see some videos, or not videos. There's a picture of in Japan where he's holding the guitar up like that, and he's got a pickup with a cover on it. Now that he could have dumped, he could have found another Super 70. He could have put in a PAF in it. Could have been in that one picture. It's got a pickup cover on it. So. Yeah, there's got to be there's at least three of them that I would know of: the Super 70, the Super Distortion, and then possibly PAF in the Destroyer to try to answer that question.
Yeah. Real quick, have you heard or know anyone that's tried the Pariah Super 70 pickup?
No, but I know Sean does great work, and I know everybody that's gotten them has been really happy with them. And I know that I believe if I didn't, I have some vintage Super 70s, and they don't work for me with the. I mean, I had the original pickups that came with my Destroyer, right? But pickups and amplifiers work together. Mm-hmm. So what works in one person's guitar out of their particular amplifier will not work for the next person that's got a different amplifier and a different guitar. So a lot of times you'll see me jumping into forums and in Facebook posts, and I'll say, who cares about pickup advice? It's irrelevant unless you have the identical guitar and the identical amplifier, okay? Mm-hmm. Somebody tells you that this pickup is great, cannot tell you what's great for your guitar and your amplifier, because the relationship is between the pickup and the amplifier, and the guitar to a lesser degree, in my opinion. But that said, I can say that the Pariah pickups in general are really good and really representative of what they're trying to represent. So, mad props to Sean.
Yeah, in my opinion, they get you close, and then you can tweak your
they get you close. Yeah, they get you close to that pickup. Now, whether they get you close to that sound is another thing entirely, because then that has to do with the pickup and the amplifier. And it's all about the pickup and the guitar and the amplifier and your fingers per se, and then the effects are somewhat irrelevant to me after that. But they're part of it, but a lesser. I mean, I'm going to say the effects might be like 20% of it. The 80% of it is the guitar, the amp, and your fingers and how you're playing. That's my thing. But yeah, specifically about Sean's stuff is excellent. I think that's great stuff. If I were to get something myself, I'd probably would try one of his for sure. No question. I can unreservedly recommend, their stuff. They're not screwing anybody over. They are what they say they are. They make excellent versions that are very close to those actual pickups, to the best of my knowledge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else?
I know you got to run, so I won't ask you any more questions.
No, go ahead. Hit me with another. I got another couple of minutes. I got to go grab the kids from my mother-in-law's, but I can probably do another one or two questions if you got time.
So you're friends with Alan Dobbs, right?
Kevin Dobbs.
Kevin Dobbs. Kevin Dobbs.
Yeah. It's
really
DODDS. Yeah, Kevin Dodds, DODDS, Dodds. Right. And Kevin and I have known each other since we were 14. We went to the same high school. I moved to Houston in 1986 when I was 14. I saw Van Halen in October of 86. I moved to Houston in November of 86. Kevin was there was a couple of guitar players in school, but Kevin was one of the few that took it seriously. Like me, and he was the only other really super bizarre, crazy Eddie Van Halen fan. And he had heard from somebody else that I had one of Eddie's picks. And I used to go to school. I had a little like a jean jacket and had like the front pocket. And I would I didn't do the patches. That wasn't me. But I had a jean jacket, and I had on the front pocket, I would carry the picks that I had gotten from Eddie at the show.
Wow.
Because I was like right in the front row in front of Eddie when he did his solo in Austin in October of 86. Before the show, I got a pick from his guitar tech, Zeke Clark, gave me a pick before the show. And then I caught one during the solo. So I have two picks from Eddie, one unused and one used. And then I've got two from Mike Anthony that I caught during that show too. Yeah. Which is, hey, but I used to carry those in my pocket with me when I went to school, and somebody had, and I probably showed them to somebody, and like I was there like 2 days, and it had gotten to Kevin that I had these picks, and Kevin just came up to me out of nowhere and just like, I heard you have one of Eddie Van Halen's picks. Is that true? I whipped it out and showed it to him, and he was like, we were both like, yeah. And then And then later on, I became friends with this girl, and that girl ended up being his girlfriend. And then I ended up hanging out with them, and so he and I became friends. I hung out with him and his whole circle, and we had just randomly bumped into each other for many, many years, and we hadn't seen each other in like 20 years or so, I guess, and maybe more. And got in touch with him on Facebook, and he lives in Austin. I live in Houston. We hadn't seen each other face to face in about 20 years. Probably, I think it was last year. Maybe it was a year ago that Kevin and I met up, and we hung out and hadn't seen each other in so long. Kevin's got a lot of cool replicas, and we have a great time together. Kevin did a great little book. It's called Edward Van Halen and an unauthorized a definitive biography. And he called that because it's a definitive biography. He made sure to use that wording because that was Kevin's perspective on Eddie is really interesting because he tells the story of what Eddie meant to him and his brother. And I knew his brother who passed away. It was the story about how Van Halen's music came to inspire Kevin to work hard to play and have a band and and just get good on guitar, and his dedication to learning all kinds of music. Kevin's a lot like me. We both work really hard at playing, but Kevin got the opposite of me. I kind of floated through a lot of different bands, and but Kevin basically ended up playing with the same guys that he's been playing with since we were 14 years old. Even to this day, he still plays with those guys. And, they played throughout the 90s together. They've had different drummers. They've had the same drummer for quite a while now, but, they went through a couple of different drummers, but the bass player and the singer and Kevin have been constant in that group. And for the longest time, they've been known as Steamroller, and they've been playing around Austin like all through the 90s, through the 2000s. We all grow up and get jobs and responsibilities and everything, but Kevin still gets his band together, and they'll play every once in a while and play some gigs out in Austin, which is a really crowded place through the 90s and the 2000s. But he's still doing it. Kevin's a great guy. We got a lot of love for each other.
Do you know if he has plans on doing another book? I know the timeline stopped in 98, so I don't know if he has plans to do another one, or do you know?
I don't think so. My suspicion is that probably not. Kevin. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he and I probably have a certain time period where we kind of cut off, where we're not as big fans of certain eras, but so I don't know. I don't know that he would, I could imagine that Kevin might actually revisit the definitive biography, and he may expand on it or, do something different with it. And I would totally support him in doing that. I think that'd be great. But, the book is really, really cool. And I recommend anybody go out there and get it. Kevin's just an awesome guy. And, just good friends through all these years after, ups and downs and weirdness in life. It's really cool to have a good friend like him after all this time. Mm-hmm. Oh, to answer that question, no, I have no idea who Spider Taylor is. I heard about that guy in the Sunset Sound videos, and I have no idea who the hell that is. And apparently only a few people do. But yeah, the videos from Sunset Sound are really worth checking out. Some of the guys don't know what they're talking about, but some guys do, and you can kind of piece it together. I will say that Brian Kehew is a genius, a brilliant guy. And anything that guy says in the Sunset Sound interviews that he did, you can take to the bank. Brian is a master. He's a master musician. He's a master technician. He's an awesome guy, and this world is lucky to have Brian Kehew. As much as I was going off about Greg Renoff and how fantastic he is, man, Brian Kehew is something else in the world of music in general. But yeah. If you're a Van Halen fan, go watch those Brian Kehew videos with Sunset Sound. Super knowledgeable guy.
I figured they would do more, and I thought they were going to do more, and they kind of stopped. They kind of went off left field and did some print stuff. But yeah, I can't remember who the older gentleman is that they interviewed. I don't know if he was a promoter or someone that was involved with the band outside of the recording. I can't remember what his name was, but yeah,
Doug Messenger. Awesome. Doug Messenger is a guitar player that played with Van Morrison. He's famous for playing with Van Morrison on, I believe he played on the St. Dominic's Preview album and possibly another one. But Doug was friendly with Eddie and had just kind of he had wandered in the studio for a minute during Fair Warning, but Doug was not he's not one of us. He was doing his own thing at the time. Obviously, liked Eddie and all that kind of stuff. But he's not like sort of an authority on Van Halen by any stretch. He just happened to be there for a couple of interesting moments. And his interview is worth watching. He's an interesting guy, and I'm a huge Van Morrison fan, and it was really interesting to hear him talk. I was more interested to hear what he had to say about Van Morrison, than Led Zeppelin. But the Sunset Sound videos are wonderful. There's such a huge history of great music coming out of there, and I'm a big Prince fan, so I love hearing about all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that Doug Messenger, he's a cool guy. People were kind of ripping on him because he's an older guy and he's not giving you all the Van Halen information that you want. But who's going to remember all of that stuff at this point? And he's a guy that lived his own life. And Fruitcake Tony, you are right. They are golden. They're so well worth watching. I don't know that they're going to do. They wanted to get Ted on there. I don't know that that's going to be happening. They wanted to get Don Landy. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I have my doubts. I hope maybe Ted or Greg Renoff or somebody can get Don Landy. Don Landy's the guy.
Yeah, where's he at? Where's he at?
Where's Don Landy?
I know he's retired, but
he's at home. He's hermetic. He's not a talker. He doesn't want to. I don't know if my personal opinion is that he may not ever speak about anything. He may be one of those people like Rudy Laren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he hates the media.
Yeah, he doesn't really. There's been a few little instances where he said some things here and there, but he's one of those guys that takes his stuff with Eddie seriously, and he doesn't really expose stuff, and Don doesn't either. I wish he would for posterity, because Don is, if there's a fifth member of Van Halen, to me it's more Don than it is Ted in a lot of ways.
He was close to the action, wasn't he? He was instrumental in developing a lot of the tone that Eddie, critical.
And the writing and the arranging, certainly from like '84 through 5150 and OU812, and OU812 was the last album that Landy did with him. And then for me, I'm personally, many people know that like my love of Van Halen ends in 1989, and I don't really care about anything that happened after 1989. And I kind of try to put it out of my mind in a lot of ways. And it may be no coincidence that my love of Van Halen is ending in '89. And that's also when Don Landy ended his involvement with Van Halen, was 1989. And, that was also clearly the more or less, Ted came back and did some work on, different album, but, he was a key component of everything,
Do you know, Alan, real quick, Andrew, did he do anything after OU812 with anyone else, or was he done after that?
Not to my knowledge. He may have done. I think he helped Eddie with other things. He did the Wildlife soundtrack. He did the Private Life band, that Private Life project, I believe he produced with Eddie. But yeah, that's it to my knowledge. I don't think he did anything after that.
Go ahead, Andrew. You got a question about your guitar?
No, I'm just showing out. Robot Master Switch just said, can I hold my guitar up so that he can lick his lips or something like that? So, yeah, sorry.
Well, guys, I am going to have to exit out of here and go get my kids, but it has been wonderful. I hope to do it again. I know you guys are going to do that deep dive show on the first album. I'd love to be able to, chime in if I can. if I can't be there with you on the screen, I'll try to be in there and give some comments in the comment section when I can. Basically what happens when I'm doing that is that, you know, I'm doing that in the brief moment after I put my kids to bed, and I'm laying in bed waiting for my wife to take off her makeup and brush her teeth. So, so when you see me in there commenting, you know, I've usually got like 20 minutes where I can get away with doing that. Yeah, where I'm just waiting for my wife to come to bed and I've gotten the kids to sleep. So I'll try to do that at least on the deep dives at the
for
very
sure.
least.
Well, I apologize.
Alan, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Cool.
It's okay, bro.
Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate it, and you know, it's been fun. I love watching y'all's show. Everybody, give these guys some thumbs up and some subscriptions. It's a wonderful little channel, and I love how you guys are. There's a cool thing about being real specific, and that's one thing that you guys do well. And you can ruminate on one album, you can ruminate on one thing, and that's an awesome thing. You know, I think that's part of the charm of this is that you guys take the time, you know, and with Brad, I'm sorry I missed Brad. I hope to catch up with him again. But I love, and it's just great having everybody talk about all the albums, and the British Blues show is wonderful. I love hearing about everybody's thoughts and research on those great albums that inform so much of Van Halen. Like I said, you know, it's like, you know, Eric Clapton, as I'll go on and on and on and on and on and on, you know, Eric Clapton's just inextricably linked with Eddie Van Halen. And, you know, I hope that I've helped to prove that to some people at least, because it's a big help. If you know the foundation, it's much easier to understand the more complicated playing that Eddie did. And when you link those two things, it's like a magical thing. It's like, oh, it's one of those light bulb moments. It's the aha moment from Oprah Winfrey. It's wonderful, you know, and it's a kind of it's a cool thing, you know. I love the show. I love this show. I love the British Blues show. Andrew, you're great. Kurt, you're great. Brad, we love you.
Appreciate it. We appreciate all the kind words and the support, Alan, and we look forward to having you on as a guest for more shows. You have a permanent invitation when we do some of the Cream albums. We'd love to have you on and give your opinion and your experience with those albums. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you guys have jumped on through the Johnny Bean raid, go back please and watch the start from the show from the start, because Alan has just given us a whole heap of information that some of you probably may not be aware of, and go back and listen to Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2 after hearing that, because it's fascinating, it's remarkable, and we're privileged to have fans like Alan put 40 years worth of work into this, and for him to share that with us on our show with the Rev and everyone else, it's been remarkable. Thank you, Alan. Keep in touch. Be safe, everybody.
Yep. Thanks very much. Bye, guys. Great seeing you. Cheers.
Good night, guys.
Okay, so we're not going to shoot off yet, bro. We're going to have a bit of a chat for a couple of minutes.
Man, I feel bad.
I was wondering. Where's the Rev? I flicked and I thought, okay, all right. No, I had to change it earlier. Remember, for Al. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's been a crazy week.
It's okay, bro. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I know it's been crazy. Good to see you, bro.
I haven't even changed out my work clothes yet.
Good to see you. You're looking good.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll see you next week.
Mm-hmm.
For the 5150 show. So we've got bit of a you're going to have a special guest jumping on, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. We'll see. Kind of a last minute couldn't make it, but hopefully he can be on. So, and Brad will be on, and thank you everyone for sticking around. Fruitcake Tony, I know a lot of these guys probably were on Johnny's show as well. So thanks, guys, for joining us. Appreciate it for sure. And having Alan on here, what a fountain of knowledge he is.
Mate, I think I was the quietest I've ever been. I just sat there and listened to him.
Well, and what's crazy too is how long has he said it's been since he's been on a show?
Oh, a while. So yeah, but he said that he's going to try and make some time to jump on, some future shows with us too. So yeah, we appreciate that, and thank you guys for supporting us.
5 or 6 years
a while
ago. And he's grown up. He's a grown man now.
I think the last show he was on was the show that we had after Eddie passed. We'd had our channel did a bit of a tribute, and I think
he jumped on that one.
Yeah, you jumped on that. So when was that? 7 months ago, bro? 7 months.
Yeah. I watched the tail end of that one. Yeah,
awesome. Do you want to do a quick shout out to everybody?
Sure.
Get. Is that okay? And we'll let you
absolutely.
go.
All right. Big shout out tonight, Fruitcake Tony. We got Hobo Brody. I guess that's how you say it. Johnny Heartbreaker, Lenny Lou and Mary, Mark Tanner, Mike Neese. We got my buddy Robot Master Switch. We got Teresa from Brazil. And I know earlier we had, who'd we have? Cobra Kai. He was in here. Wayno was in here. Brian Spalding was in here. So all of you guys, thank you for jumping in. I'm actually excited to go catch the first hour and a half of the show tonight and kind of check out what Allen talked about with the transcription of Eruption and hear all the knowledge that he has on that. And go get the Kevin Dodds book, guys, if you haven't got it and you're looking for some Eddie Van Halen documentation. And I got 2 new books this week. Andrew, I'll show you. Van Halen Trivia, which it's just got a bunch of trivia, and I've actually read probably the first 10 pages, and I would smoke and win any kind of money if they had money on the line for answering the questions. And then this is a new one that
awesome.
Fruitcake Tony got me on that I had never seen. Van Halen 101 by Brian May of Queen did the foreword, but this book is by Abel Sanchez.
Yeah, I've got that on PDF. It's not bad. It's a pretty good book.
Yeah, so I've read a couple chapters, haven't really dove deep into it, but yeah, I just picked those 2 up. I've been going a little crazy on eBay. I won a lot of 12 Guitar World and a bunch of old magazines with Eddie on the cover. So those are coming next week, which I'm pretty excited about. But awesome. Yeah,
hopefully they'll be ready for the 5150 show. Hey, Dog Car's been lurking.
Oh yeah, dog pa.
The dog pa. I'm going to be on later, guys, with Brian Spalding, part 2 with Simon, in about 5 hours time. So yeah, we're going to jump on part 2 with Brian Spalding. So if you guys want to hang in and join us on that show, that'll be cool. And then I'll be here tomorrow with Brad and Simon. What we've done is we've picked 5 songs from the Fleetwood Mac, Mick Fleetwood tribute for Peter Green that we're going to talk about. And then obviously the Rev will be leading us next week for part 1 of Van Halen 1. So yeah. Thank you for joining us, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Allen, for jumping on, and we look forward to doing some more shows with you, bro. Good to see you. Good to see you, Rev.
You too, man. I'm sorry. I feel terrible.
It's okay. And Bradley, if you're still traveling, bro, I don't know what he's doing. He might be at rehearsal now, getting ready. Might be tuning up for the gig. But missed you, bro. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, miss you, Brad. Did you see the post I did on Instagram with Michael Jackson dancing on his shoulder? I love you, Bradley. Love you, brother. That was funny.
We love Brad. Everyone
Oh, yeah,
loves
we do.
Brad.
Yep.
Even you know,
I just
even
want
this
to
guy.
squeeze his little cheeks.
Even this guy here. If you guys, we've got 18 in the chat watching. Just check this little shout out if you guys haven't seen it. Hold on.
Brad Cook is in the chat now, and I posted a story earlier today and asked people if you want to ask a question, you can put it in here. Brad didn't have a question; it was more of a suggestion. He said you need to collaborate with somebody from Australia.
Okay. Yes, please. And I mean, how much do we love Brad? Brad is the coolest. He's such a nice guy and such a great player. And again, that's the energy I'm talking about, like that kind of thing where I feel the love for the music first and foremost, you know, when I hear his music. So and I would love to come to Australia, you know, just always looking for real people to work with.
Right.
That's our Brad. Woo-hoo. And that was
He's famous.
That was Philip Sace. That was Philip Sace, guys. If you didn't know that.
Oh, that's funny. It's funny. He's infamous.
We're out of here, brother. We're out of here.
All right. You guys have a safe weekend. Thanks for joining, guys.
Where are we? Where is it? Where's this video? Here it is. Okay.
Hit the button.
God bless everyone. Hit the button.
Good.